Hello, everyone. Good evening to those who are in my time frame, and good day or early good morning to others. I'm very happy to see you all, even if it's in such a way through a computer, but still, and I'm very happy that this conference could take place, notwithstanding all the things that's going on. We have 4 presenters in this session today. I would ask each presenter to be very careful with your time. You have 15 to maximum 20 minutes. Please do not exceed that, so the others also have their time to say what they want to say. Also, after we hear all 4 presentations, there will be some time for questions and answers. So panelists will be able to ask their questions like normal Zoom meeting by voice. Those who are attendees listening to our panel, your option to ask questions is through typing them in the chat window. You can do that while the people are speaking, or do that afterwards. That's up to you. And I will then read out the questions, and so we'll get to the answers. Yeah, I will also remind to the panelists that please observe the usual Zoom etiquette. So if you're not speaking, then you are on mute, okay? So I think that's all that I wanted to say to you at the beginning, and I will give the floor to our first speaker today, Sirle Surt. I hope I pronounced that correctly, or at least similarly to correctly. So you're welcome.
Yes, hello to everybody. My name is Sirle Surt, and actually next to me is sitting Madli Viborg Walfridsson, and we are trying together to make an overview of this topic, which is announced in the program. And if Rain Vera is watching this program, then we send you warm greetings, and we really would like to thank Rain for all the help in our archive group, and thank you that you helped us to make this presentation. And now we would like to share our slides. So, do you see the slides? Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Today we will talk about our activity in Estonian House in Stockholm. Hopefully many of you have been here, but you, these who haven't been here, you are very welcome to visit Estonian House in central Stockholm. And here in this house, we have Estonian Cultural Archive, which was established on 18th of November 1970. And it was established by representation of Estonians in Sweden, the biggest organization in Sweden. And since 1993, we have got a new name and new form, and it's called Association of Estonians in Sweden, Rootsi Eestlaste Liit, and REL. And so we have here many different kind of collections. We have documents, articles, photos, and films. And when this archive was established, then it was decided that we are gathering all these different kind of means in these categories: escape from Estonia 1944, arrival in Sweden, refugee camps, the time which describes how the people started on the labor market, all different kind of activities of Estonian society. And there is a song, dance, meetings, organizations, everything. and individual collections. Before the COVID pandemic, we used to gathering here in the Estonian house, and these are our resources, and these are humans, people who remember who are in the photos. And this was the normal meeting when we looked at the photos and wrote down which are on the photos. And during pandemic, we continued our work. We digitalized all our work. And I have to mention that all these members are over 70s. Not all, not all.
We're the youngest one.
We are the youngest one, yes. And there's some ones are, there's somebody who's the
92, I think.
92, 93, yes. And they all learned how to use digital tools. And then we decided to use Zoom. And I was sitting in the Estonian house, and in Sweden, it hasn't been very stricted rules. So somebody could also come to Estonian house and sit with me, but not so many people. It was allowed up to 8 persons. And so we looked at the photos. And the main purpose of our work was to tag persons on the photos, because if you have a lot of pictures with unknown persons, places, time, these are useless. And if we have in our community people who still remember, let's use their knowledge. And also why we have to collect the knowledge, of course, because the other people can make research, studies, and the need to document the history. And also they use the photos and films in movies and also in media. And here is one example how we have got one photo when one person has tried to tag people and wrote also that, yeah, it was the 1945 Granjärde summer camp. And our collection contains, now today we talk about pictures, and these photos are coming from different sources. We have pictures from established photographers, which are donated to our association, to our archive. And most common and most valuable are Mr. Harald Perten and also Mikael Lepper. And then we have also got many photos from private sources. And the timeline starts from 1944 up to the 2000. And the quality is also really varying. Some are extremely good. And I have to mention that these are the old ones made by Mr. Perten, which are really good. And then the newer ones, which are not so good, even poor. And actually here I miss our friend Rein Vira, who is our expert in technique. And I'm really happy that we found Rein, who is helping us with scanning all these old photos. And so he scans in different ways. Some we get in albums, some are just the single photos, but the most better quality is black and white photos. And if there is a color photos, then we make also a copy, and that there would be also a black and white version. And actually we use JPG file type, and it's a difference from this file type, which is used by Estonian National Archive, for example. And there are practical reasons why we have chosen this one. And so all these ready files, they are saved with unique names and also a name of photographer, the date of occasion, description of occasion, so on. And we are using Picasa. And this is not so common anymore, but we still use it. And actually only for our own community needs. And the main purpose why we use Picasa, and we haven't found any other better toolbox, that it helps us to tag persons. Because before, the ladies here in the Estonian house were using this special paper, you know, and making, drawing the rounds around the persons, and then writing 1, 2, 3, and so on. It was so time confusing. Yeah.
Too much time.
To English. Yeah. Some technical information. Yes, as all these people are tagged on the photos, so there is a special system, the computer program is used. So every person which we tag will get a special number in the system automatically. We can also find these people on the other photos. And this is like artificial intelligence when you have teach the program to learn who is the person on the photo.
True faces, face recognizing.
Yes. And there is a lot of meta information on this photo, not only the person's name, but much, much more. We approximately have 15,000 photos in this toolbox we use. And actually, the number of the persons which we currently have recognized is quite low. This is only 4,000. So we have a lot of work to do, but we are also, we know that it's not possible to recognize all these people because they are very old photos, and nobody cannot recognize these people anymore. And also there are these mass meetings photos. As you can imagine that how we describe every Monday via Zoom, then we have started to thinking how to make it more effective. And then we have idea or plan to put the pictures in the groups that one Monday we can describe photos from this escaping camps, refugee camps, culture, politics, maybe also some in certain periods, schools, scouting, summer camps, academic
festivals, sporting, very different kinds of
and to ask some people from Göteborg and Eskilstuna, Norrtälje, name it, from different parts of Sweden to participate in our meetings and to try to recognize these people.
So if we are sitting here in Stockholm, we have people from, we can invite people that this Monday, coming Monday, we're going to just look about scout camps pictures. and then people who join who want.
Yeah, so we need access to people who remember.
Yeah.
And also, RAIN has been very active, also using the old newspapers, which are now digital in Tigar. And thanks to the Estonian National Library, we have access to these old newspapers. So there are also some problems which we now discuss how we can solve this, because as you can imagine, our working days on Mondays are like there are not so many people, but there are so many people who are sitting at their homes and could help us. So we need some kind of program to present these photos, but in this way that these photos are still tagged. But we haven't found this kind of system. Some programming probably is needing. And also that people could add comments, the comments on this tagged files. That this practice we have had is that we have sent all our digitalized original photos to the Estonian National Archive. And there is one system which you probably know. It's this Fotis, which I will show you soon. But unfortunately, this system is not suitable for our needs. Maybe there is some young people who are listening us and maybe can help us with some programming. Yeah. And yes, this is the Fotis, and if there is someone from Estonian National Archive, Rahvusarhiiv, then we really would like to thank you for all this help for cooperation. But we have to discuss also next steps, that how we can do all these things better. That, for example, when we are digitalizing our photos here, then they have to make it again in Estonia. And all these tagging systems and all this, there is no this function at Fotis at the moment. And so we use at the moment this gallery function in Flickr. And so we have a paid konto, which we use and count here. And here we have different kind of albums. The first one here is, for example, Stockholm Eesti Algkool, the Estonian school in Stockholm. There we have gathered over 500 old photos. And here we see also that over 800 people has watched these photos in this album. But unfortunately, this album don't have this kind of tag system as we have in Picasa. But here is this comment function, and this is really important. And now we would like to end our presentation one example that we have practical need for quality photos. And if you recognize, this is our grand old lady, Maira Utbachn from Stockholm, who is now 101 years old, still very bright, not so active anymore in digital world, but we have very close contact to her. And we really would like to thank her here in front of you all who are watching. This lady is the person who saved our archive in Stockholm, in Sweden. Without her, we wouldn't never had this kind of archive. And here is also a photo of our journal, Rahvuslik Kontakt. And this has also been like a very complex work that all this work we do in our archive group on Mondays, we can use practically in our journal, where we can show to everybody these old good photos and these persons which we have discovered during our Monday meetings. So thank you very much, and greetings to everybody from Maira from Stockholm.
Yes, thank you very much. That's really a valuable work you're doing. Really, thank you for this presentation and for saving these pictures, and the main thing is saving the memories of the people who are in pictures. So as a reminder to all who are listening, if you have questions to the presenters, please either write them down in the chat now or just note them down and write them later. We will get to answer some questions after we hear all 4 presentations. So as next, I would like to ask Piret Norhani, our leader and president of the Baltic Heritage Network. So Piret, please.
Hello, everyone. Really good to see you, or at least hear you and have you here. Okay, where I am now. To get to the beginning of my presentation, sorry. So, Vemmo's leap into the digital world, it has been really quite active. And when COVID struck in mid-March last year, great silence fell over Toronto. Events were cancelled, and Vemmo staff and volunteers were sent home to work remotely. And our restrictions were really strict. The Tartu College resident staff did, however, stay in the office because students still remained at the residences and could not be left alone. Though as the end of the school year approached and borders began to close, many students also left, and the silence at Tartu grew even deeper. The whole city was abandoned. The streets were empty and the stores and restaurants closed. We didn't know yet that in less than a year, Toronto would become the lockdown capital of North America, as we have suffered the longest lockdown periods and strictest restrictions. Personally, I was relieved. It was strange but enjoyable to stay home and work quietly by myself. I can't even remember if I ever had that luxury before in my life. As we were getting ready for the big celebration of Tartu College 50, that was to happen later in 2020, I had a lot of paperwork and research to do, and finally I had time for that. The exhibit book and documentary had to be ready by the end of September. Suddenly, there were no meetings or events at Tartu College. Even my inbox remained quiet, at least for some time. No one knew how long we would stay in this situation. Everyone was just waiting to see what would happen next. The Estonian Literary Museum and the Estonian National Museum were quick to announce their collection campaigns for COVID-19 stories. Our Baltic Canadian imprint group, consisting of local Latvians, Lithuanians, Baltic Germans, and Estonians, followed their lead. Our campaign, COVID-19, we are all in this together, is still on. This was also one of the reasons I started actively blogging again. I promised myself there will not be a day without the line "Ei päeva kirjata" until this madness is over. Little did I know I'd still be blogging in September 2021. For Vemmo, it took Less than a month for us to come out of hibernation and figure out new ways to offer online programs to our people. We made our first Zoom account, and from there, our online life began to gain momentum. In April, our first series of online quizzes dedicated to Tartu, to the 50th anniversary of Tartu College. Through the winter of 2019-2020, we conducted 36 interviews with people who have worked or lived at Tartu College or have organized and taken part in community events. We also looked through the archival recordings, photos, and documents. All of this helped us to prepare questions which were both educational and fun. The winners received 20 Tartu 50 souvenirs. Our team of 4 was excited, and so was the audience. 6 rounds of quizzes took place from April to June. Here you can see how many events we had last year and how many of them took place online. And for this year, we have had 24 so far, and those are all been conducted online, and more is coming. There were events cancelled. We couldn't have a real concert with Christian Randalu here in March last year, and Vemo fundraising dinner with Margus Tabor and his funny theater show was cancelled. But the program for Tartu 50 celebration was changed into online program. Events cancelled. Oh yeah, okay, that I told you about. Events that came instead. Many of them are old ideas in a new form. Tartu 50 was the main focus for our last year's program. In addition to quizzes, we posted 28 archival recordings from Vemo's collections on the Vemo YouTube channel, lectures, workshop, Urbi choir, Simare concerts. All of this fit nicely with the mission of the Year of Digital Culture, an initiative announced by the Estonian Ministry of Culture that was celebrated throughout the year 2020. The following online events were also part of Tartu 50 celebration. First, Elmar Tampõld 100, and he was the architect of Tartu College, as most of you know, longtime president of Tartu College and author of Vemo idea as well. Then we had our very first museum night. We first time took part in this Estonian event because it was online and we could do that. It was 5 hours program. And third, we had those online presentations, Tartu 50. Those are the first attempts to run Vemo's very own TV station, and turned out to be very popular among audiences on both sides of the Atlantic. And one reason was that you could watch it later when the real show was off. It's still available on YouTube. For these programs, we did some new content, including interviews and virtual tour to Tartu College, and used our endless archival resources, videos, photos, newspapers. As our first quizzes were very popular and people asked for more, we offered them more. In September, we celebrated the Language Week, and also we had a quiz, Know Your Neighbors, where we educated people both in Estonian language and those of our neighbors. And the year ended with a Christmas quiz in December, from December 10th to December 24th. Among the easiest online events to organize are lectures. All you need to do is have a Zoom account, find a speaker, and for online lectures, it doesn't matter where he or she lives. Then you advertise the event, and voila, here are some examples. The speakers were from Sweden, Estonia, Ireland, in Canada. And we have had 2 lectures on COVID-19 from Dr. Peeter Põldre, and the third one is coming end of September this year. It was the same with film screenings. You have to find a film, get the permission to show it, find someone interesting for a follow-up talk, and these were the films which we hosted. Unfortunately, though, it did not always go that smoothly. Usually the film is uploaded to a secret YouTube address from where it's streamed, but the film with the film 1944, we ran into problems. Although we had approval from the filmmakers, YouTube had a mind of its own and stopped the screening. Luckily, our Johanna was clever and quick enough to find a solution. Following the film's talks with the filmmakers and some of the other interesting people involved always added value to our screenings. It gave the audience a possibility to dig deeper and get closer to the film and its makers. Vemu was also on board with some online conferences, which Marin Laak mentioned yesterday, and those are the two. Estonia, Sweden, Canada, and the US were the countries that participated in these academic events, and they showed us that for like-minded people, half a day is not too long a time for an online conference. And seeing your fellow speakers right on the screen of your laptop creates a very intimate atmosphere for discussions. Another of our popular formats from past years has been workshops, be it cooking or handicraft. These, including our cooking shows, moved online too, and you can see what they were. And the cooks or chefs were our community members, but we have never offered an art workshop before. Enda Barel, the Estonian artist living in Vancouver, had already led a similar watercolor workshop in 2020 organized by the Society of Estonian Artists in Toronto for their members. The Estonian Foundation of Canada had supported the development of instructional videos. Elo Palo, the chairwoman of EKKT, generously gave her permission for us to use these videos. 10 people participated in this workshop over Zoom from all over Canada, and even one participant from Sweden. We celebrated International Museum Day this year with a game which allowed participants to peek into Vemu's collections. The simple memory card game based on finding two cards with matching images using the lowest number of clicks turned out to be quite popular. We hope that with this, our message also reached everyone. Vemu is ready to accept archival material and publications from Canadian Estonians. In April this year, we celebrated finally the 9th Vemu's fundraiser, but the occasion was 30 years of the restoration of Estonia's independence. New interviews with community members and with musicians Ivo-Linna and Antti Kammisto from Estonia were conducted. Archival recordings from the end of the 1980s and 90s were screened, including Mart Laars, Ivo-Linna's and Alo Mattiisen's trip to Canada in 1989. The guest speaker, Marju Lauristin, spoke about achieving independence and the behind-the-scene adventures that took place during that time. Ivo-Linna and Antti Kammisto recorded a mini concert, which we could also enjoy online. Takeout food was prepared by Vemu and Tartu College team and Ülle Veltman, and it was a new experience for us in a totally new field of food delivery, and it worked out well. To celebrate this historic day in August, we offered the full fundraising dinner program for spring 21st at the discounted price, but the archival footage of Professor Marju Lauristin's lecture held at the University of Toronto in 1989 was also available to view free of charge. How precise were her predictions on Estonia's independence? You can find out by watching the lecture on YouTube. In June, we ran a weekend-long online festival to celebrate Roman Dois, a musician, composer, conductor, 105th birthday anniversary. A compilation of archival recordings by Vemu and Estonian television, as well as some new materials we shared. Many thanks to Estonian television for this partnership. Estonian Music Week is one of the biggest endeavors of Vemu, and it has been through all the same trials and tribulations the rest of the performing arts sector has faced. The dates for the festival have been changed many times, and now we hope to offer a hybrid program on October 22nd and 23rd. Canadian musicians will perform in Canada, Estonians in Estonia. The rest of the world can watch it online, including some lucky ones who can be there at the live venues if we can have those live shows. Our online series of concerts experimented with different locations, formats. So last year we celebrated Tartu 50 and the concerts took place on the roof of Tartu College. Erik Laar went to the archival rooms and Honeypoo had a concert in a student kitchen. Our spring season started with Tiina Kiik's and Tuuli Partasik concert. The series was called Memories of Home, and you can see who were the other musicians. The second concert we owned thanks to Ruta Karma in Riga, who helped us to figure out what are the songs both Estonians and Latvians know, so that we had like mixed program of popular song sung by both Estonians and Latvians. This is our core group of Estonian Music Week, Sebastian and Elis. They are doing a really great job, and the Estonian Music Week is blooming. Coming up in our autumn season, we will have a conference, lectures, and film evenings dedicated to Finno-Ugric indigenous peoples of North America, all online, including the virtual tour to Estonian National Museum exhibit, the Echo of Urals. So I would really ask you to join us, and you can also watch those conference sessions from our YouTube channel after the conference is over. One of the old ideas waiting on our list was the Vemu translation competition, which seemed to be a perfect match for the time when most of us had to stay at home. It was organized in partnership with the Estonian Writers Union and the Estonian Literary Center. 26 people from 9 countries participated, and the winner was Tiina Otema from Toronto, and she will be published in the Estonian Literary Magazine and receive the chance to go to the translators seminar held by the Estonian Literary Center next year in Estonia. But we kept working with our archives. Our bibliography club, our volunteers, set to work describing archival photos in the beginning of October last year on Zoom. This was possible thanks to our online databases and digitized photos. Enjoyable Tuesday mornings on Zoom offered company and activities, and we really didn't have to go to the archives because we used the photos which were digitized and cataloged already, but they needed an additional descriptions, and that's what we did. The club members, Reet Marley and Bella Doe, wrote descriptions of Edgar Väär's films and 80 films they worked on. This work was also possible to do from homes, as these films were digitized by the Estonian Film Archives and can be viewed from their database. This year, we have been working on cataloging and digitizing the recorded lectures from Kotkajärve Metsaülikool so that they can begin sharing them online from their website, and some are already posted on the website, and Rasmus did enormous work with Metsaülikool Forest University people to accomplish this task. Metsaülikool got support from the Compatriots Program Estonia. In the summer of 2020, we were working with the Estonian Arts Center collection, 355 works, and we cataloged, described, photographed, and finally moved the collection to Vemu at Tartu College from the Toronto Estonian House. In the summer of this year, we moved the archival collections from the Estonian Central Archives to Vemu from the Toronto Estonian House, which have to be empty by the spring of next year because it was sold. This included packing and sorting the books, some of which will be sent to Estonia. Ruth Veskimet worked with vinyl records, and we have over 500 boxes to be moved to Tartu College. In this summer, we began transferring our document archive to the National Archives of Estonia database and ICE, and that was also we were able to do that from homes as our own Tartu Institute. And why we did it, it was that because our Tartu Institute, the old Tartu Institute website was closed by the Canadian server administrator in the spring, and we had to find out the new solution where we could have our archive information available. And to this day, 9 WEMU archival collections have been transferred to ICE. Thanks to you, thanks Lani for working on that. This year, we also started adding additional descriptions to the videos from the Estonian Cultural Heritage Club, and you can see historical photo of that club when it was still active. Those videos were described by students of Tartu University. Such project was written by Aigi Rahidam from the university, and she got support for the project from Compatriots program. And our thanks go to Katariina Sofia Pätson and Anette Leht, who keep working on that project. We are still waiting to get assistance from the Estonian National Archive here. They have to be here first in last year's fall. Now we hope them to have here this fall. It's still not possible, maybe next year. Collection initiatives. I told already about the interviews we conducted about the Tartu College history, 36 we made last year, and about the COVID campaign. But at the end of last year, we started a very new campaign, and it's the School Lore Collection Initiative in collaboration with the Estonian Literary Museum and Piret Voolaid, who also gave a lecture about the school lore tradition and collections at Literary Museum. And we hope that it might become a pilot, it might be a pilot project for a bigger project to start collecting school lore from all the Estonian diaspora communities. We are still consistently receiving a lot of books, and we will be sending excess copies to Estonia at the end of this year. Again, we have to thank Compatriots program for their support. We are still receiving archives in COVID times too, though about a third less than usual. Toronto Public Library books have been taken over by WEMU because they are closing down collections of different languages, unfortunately. There has been almost no field work in COVID times, except for the emptying of the Toronto Estonian House. But in October last year, at the invitation of Anu Jõe, we went to film the home of her father, Scoutmaster Heino Jõe, because the house was to be sold to new owners. And we interviewed former Scout boys Lars Levat and Andrus Vahter on the spot. Exhibits. We were able to open the ESTO exhibit we made together with Estonian National Museum and Riina Reinvelt. We opened it at Tartu College in February 2020, and it could be visited until halfway through March. To this date, it is still up because the building is closed and people don't get to see the exhibit. The Tartu 50 exhibition, along with a book and documentary film, are still being produced, and we again have to thank Compatriots program for that. In September last year, due to the innovative idea of Rasmus, who is on the picture here, we had a window exhibit that was dedicated to Language Week and was part of Canada Culture Days program. What we did, we used the postcards made by Estonian Institute introducing Estonian language to foreigners, and we showed them on the windows of Tartu College G floor, and that was pretty popular. People stopped and watched our exhibit. And this year also the good news came from Kaunas that our Sharing Our Stories exhibit made together with other Baltic communities here was opened in Kaunas at President Adamku's library and museum on occasion of 30 years of diplomatic relations between Canada and Baltic countries, Lithuania specifically. And last year, the first model of WEMU's new permanent exhibit for our future building was completed in the summer and in cooperation with Estonian design bureau TMD. And that's a good moment to jump to the next topic, which would be WEMU's new home. We have taken active steps toward building WEMU a new home. You can see here the bigger one is the new Estonian Center, the new Estonian House. The brick one on the right is the future WEMU building, and on the right you can't see there is a Tartu College. Many Zoom meetings have been held with both Canadian and Estonian partners this year. The construction of the new Toronto Estonian House, or International Estonian Center Keskus, as it's called, will start this year next to Tartu College. It encouraged the Estonian Studies Center to move forward with the plans for VEMU. What have we done? The new building design are on the desk of architect Alar Kombats. The model of future permanent exhibit was completed last year. This autumn, we will adapt it to the new building plans and make it into an animation. This will be necessary for fundraising purposes. We have been working on composing the goals, mission, and values of VEMU, and this spring we started rebranding VEMU with the Estonian design bureau Velvet. It has been a very exciting and educating process. Our Estonian partners from Kalaruudus are designing a new VEMU website. Thanks Compatriots program again for support, and we hope to share the results with the public in the late autumn this year or the beginning of next year. Therefore, we are preparing for a strong fundraising campaign so that the new VEMU building can start to rise from the ground in a few years. And finally, some lessons learned. The right people at the right time at the right places. Rasmus, our DG wizard, Lani, the designer, Aina, the avid translator, Katja, dedicated photo archivist, preparing our volunteer working days, Reet and Vella, the film crew, Kelly keeping herself busy both at Tartu College and STMI archives, and the list goes on. Many thanks to all for their talents, flexibility, and hard work. Technical equipment, software. We needed more laptops, software for conducting, streaming, and restreaming events and meetings, Zoom, and even more Zoom. Our digital capability saved us. Existing databases and digital collections enabled remote work, but there still had to be some of us going to the archives once in a while, thanks Rasmus, Kerli, and Keila. Our digital activity has created a lot of new digital content, which you can get acquainted with through the VEMU and Estonian Music Week YouTube channels and various databases. Money. An empty Tartu College means no money for VEMU. We have started looking for other resources in Canada, lots of application writing, but have also applied different plans and ways of thinking. It forces us to think out of the box and to bring to life some of the ideas that had been waiting so far. And then geographical expansion, new audience groups, and growing numbers. The internet doesn't have borders, almost. The way we plan our events now is totally different from pre-COVID times. There are no travel or accommodation costs or flight changes. Don't get me wrong, we still want to host guests in person, but we know now that you can also entertain or educate people online. Our next online conference is dedicated to Indigenous peoples here in North America and Europe and Siberia, as said, so join us on Zoom on October 7th. Lifelong learning. Hats off to our BiblioClub senior volunteers who were brave enough to join our Zoom workshops. You are our role models. And collaboration and partnerships. Without our partners, we haven't done much, but the range of people and organizations in our sphere has grown even in COVID times. Or should I say especially in COVID times, because online programming has led to a broader and unrestricted approach to finding new partners. And last but not least, online events have provided us with meaningful activities in the time when leaving your home and meeting people was impossible. Museums make people happy, research says, and they can make people happy, or at least happier, even in COVID times. Thank you.
Thank you, Piret. I have to say that you have been busy during this COVID time. You really have been busy. So, but we have to move on. So I ask the next presenter, Ines Kalniņa from Latvian National Archives. Please, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for this possibility to take a part in this late night Estonian show. And I will shortly introduce you about Archivist latest project from pre-COVID time, which we started 2 years ago, but not finished. And first of all, I will begin with a brief explanation of my title. Why there are still exile and diaspora. I don't want to, but I still have to divide. Even if we do not go into too much detail on this issue, it is clear that the composition of archival documents will differ for these two groups. If we talk about archives, then the classic opinion is that exile will have a lot of paper documents, copies of documents, printed photos, and newspaper clippings about everything possible. But diaspora, on the other hand, will either have everything digitally or probably nothing. In the diaspora, the issue of archives has only recently begun to appear in the last decades. Yes, and the word archive sometimes scares them because it's mostly because it's a responsibility. Does the diaspora prefer exile only paper? No, it depends. Both these groups has undergroups and mixed variations, and now they all go into digital world. Archivist view is a second. Is an archivist the same as historian? Not exactly. Archivist is a historian's best friend. Yes, what archivists do? Archivists transmit knowledge and experience of past and present human interaction, present and future generations. And archivists do this by identifying, documenting, and preserving archives, and of course, enabling their continuing use. And archive two meanings. One of them is, for example, where I work is the National Archives of Latvia, is an organization responsible for the selection, care, and use of records of continuing value. And the second meaning, which is more common, is repository, building, or place dedicated to their storage, preservation, and use. And the third, Latvians and Munster. Munster plays an valuable role in Latvian life and historical events. The history of the formation, maintenance, and existence of the Latvian archive in Munster is linked to a number of public organizations established and operating in Germany. These are the Latvian Central Council, the Latvian Central Committee, the Latvian Community in Germany, and the Munster Latvian Center. Each of these organizations has left an important in the history of exile, and some of them continue to be more or less active in adapting to modern conditions and diaspora interests. Sometimes younger people think that Latvians choose Munster themselves because maybe they just feeling not so good in the place where they lived, and after long searches compared to another cities, held a competition and finally decided to move to Munster. No, that did not happen. As we already know, last century in Baltic, Soviets come in, then Nazis in, and Soviets out, then again Soviets in and Nazis out. And the people of the Baltic states were not asked for their opinion. When the Soviet Red Army approaching the eastern border of Latvia in the summer 1944, an extensive refugee flow of Latvian population started westwards and mostly to Germany. From Riga, vacations began at the beginning of August 1944 and continued until October. In the summer of 1945, the Latvians in West Germany were situated in over more than 300 refugee camps maintained by United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. They are quite often divided or combined each time the population is moved in these refugee camps. The number of refugees in them varies between several hundred and thousands. The largest Latvian settlement is the Esslingen camp, which once had more than 5,000 Latvian residents. In the area of Münster, Latvian refugees live in Greven, Detmold, Marburg, and Augustdorf camp. Each of them has its own Latvian school. In the first years after the war, the life of the camps were characterized by waiting and hoping for political or military turn that would open the gate back to Latvia. End of 30s, the pathos of hope has faded, care in the camps were weakening, and as a temporary home, what was a Germany did not seem attractive anymore. The wave of immigration is intensifying and the refugee camps are emptying. In 50s, there were only 20,000 Latvians in Germany, mostly elderly people without relatives, war invalids, the sick persons, and persons who want to stay closer to Latvia. Augustdorf Latvian School is already the only Latvian school in Germany. Some folk schools after the liquidation of camps has transformed to additional schools, some kind of weekend schools for Latvians. Augustdorf Latvian School remains the only full-time gymnasium with Latvian as a language of instruction and examinations in Latvian. And in general, the life in the Augustdorf refugee camp is in many ways similar to the small town in pre-war Latvia. In 50s, construction began for the Augustdorf camp for military purposes. The wooden barracks were demolished and the inhabitants moved to Münster to former artillery barracks. Now, in this building are fire station, what you see. In the first decades, the students were mainly for Germany. Then already later, large part came from USA and other countries. And from there also most comes donations for the maintenance of school. And that time the main problem are the difficulty to find new teachers, because as a part of German education system, they must comply with the German law, and teacher must have appropriate education and must speak in Latvian. So you must be maybe asking me why I'm talking so much about schools. Because it's all closely linked to the archive. Every liquidation of camps moving to another building or city always has consequences to the archive, because archives never come first, especially in process of moving. Do we need these boxes with old papers? The answer will be mostly no. And Münster Latvian Gymnasium plays a very important role for archives. The rest of documentation of Latvian refugee life archive was in the premises of Münster Latvian Gymnasium for many years, not always in suitable conditions, until an archive of exile documents and newspapers and library and museum rooms dedicated to Latvian literature. In 80s, the Münster Gymnasium has to deal with a new school building. A new organization was established, the Latvian Center in Münster, and fundraising for construction began. Funds are raised in the form of donation loans and as well as significant financial support from the German states. The architects of the new buildings are Maija Sinka-Gobiņa, Gustav Schilde, and Juri Strauciņš. In 1986, Münster Latvian Gymnasium moved to the new building and continued its work until the school closed in 1998. And now here's the whole house belongs to Latvian and is leased to various other organizations. And now we're going in. And here, how you see, is always three things together: museum, library, and archive. The historical heritage preserved in the Latvian Center in Münster includes an archive of documents and periodicals in exile, a library, as well as museum values. The library collection is compiled mainly for the needs of Münster Latvian Gymnasium, mostly various educational and fictional literature in Latvian, dictionaries, reference collections. Now the library is regularly supplemented with books published in Latvia. A large part of collection consists of periodicals, newspapers, and magazines published both in exile and in the Soviet Union. The newspaper Brīvā Latvija is a complete set and was used by the reader in the reading room in library of the Latvian Center in Münster. Other newspapers and magazines also have several copies. There is also incomplete and missing issues. And why did we fly to California now? Because the whole Latvian archive of Münster is not kept in one place. How did it happen and why? The Latvian Central Council and the Latvian Central Committee, founded in 1945, undertook to coordinate the various needs of Latvian refugees living in Germany, including raising the issue of storing exile documents and developing a program for the Latvian Refugee Life Archive. A few years later, in 1948, a decision was made to store archives and cultural property abroad. And it was clear that initial hopes of returning to Latvia would not be met. And an agreement was signed with Stanford University as the safest and most appropriate archive country outside Latvia and even Europe. Hoover Institute for the Custody of Latvian Refugee Life Archive. This archive collection is currently still in this repository, although it was originally intended to keep only temporarily in the United States and with the restoration of Latvia's independence as the deadline. In 2003, the State Archives of Latvia received microfilms of documents from the Hoover Institution with materials about Latvian soldiers in prison camps, Latvian refugee camps, exile organization, as well as documents about pre-war Latvian life. These microfilms has also converted to the more modern data carrier, digitized by our archive. And here is a little technical note. We have a new, our archive have a new website, still, of course, under development. And not everything is working as expected yet. And Mekle Elena is a central search engine for archives. And with introduction with the new working habits, outside office as a remote work, here's a result of the pandemic. This database has been significantly updated. Part of the Latvian exile diaspora archive in Münster was transferred to Latvian State Archives, and in 2002, it was transferred to the Latvian State Archives by Artur Sipulis, chairman of the Latvian community in Germany. That the transfer of the archive for safekeeping to the State Archives of Latvia caused a split in the Latvian society in exile and diaspora, mostly exile, and long discussions about the necessity and usefulness of this decision. And our archive has another collection of persons who are closely related to Münster Latvian Gymnasium. But now we are back to Münster again, and going really into the archive. And what surprised me most is that this building has a real archive repositories. It usually isn't it. Archive documents are rarely stored in secure conditions. Here is absolutely, I would say, better than could expected. In the basement of Latvian Center Münster, an archive has been created, already planned and built in the building project with various documentation of Latvians in exile. Storage and security conditions are very good. The problem is the situation with the access to the public and research, because most of the archive documents are arranged in ordered or particularly arranged in order on shelves in the folders and boxes. Continuing the cooperation between the National Archives of Latvia, the Latvian Center in Münster, and the Latvian community in Münster, the Latvian State Archives began work with Münster Latvian Gymnasium collection, which contained historical evidence of Latvian education in Latvian, the liquidation of refugee camps, the transformation of Latvian schools in exile into weekend schools or so-called supplementary schools, with Münster Latvian Gymnasium remaining the full-time Latvian gymnasium with Latvian as a language of instruction in exile, gradually integrating into German education system, obtaining recognized as high school diplomas with the right to continue education and study at German university, and until the termination of the Münster Latvian Gymnasium. This collection of documents includes Münster Latvian Gymnasium archive, incoming and outgoing articles, activity and financial reports, teaching materials, examination and meeting documents, applications of teachers and students, boarding school documentation, scholarships, donations, living fees, etc. The history of Münster Latvian Gymnasium includes not only the preservation of the Latvian language and identity, but also active participation in various anti-Soviet protests, while the Soviet press described Münster Latvian Gymnasium as a center of revanchism and depravity, and where the Latvian language was taught in very low level. During awakening, the Münster Latvian Gymnasium served as a kind of bridge between exiles and the restorers of Latvia's independence. Many of students of the Münster Latvian Gymnasium later became actively involved in reconstruction of Latvia, become very known Latvian politicians. In November 2019, the Latvian State Archives went to identify Latvian diaspora documents in the Latvian Center in Münster, and in the March 2020 began archiving the Latvian Exile Archives, arranging documents for the Latvian Gymnasium. Unfortunately, the practical work had to be stopped due to the declaration of state of emergency because of COVID. And the ongoing project has to be stopped. And now it's not really clear when we will be able to fully continue the archiving work, because we can plan for the long term. Archiving also provides for a minimum of several weeks and even months, as well as our other intention in cooperation with Latvians who living outside Latvia in connection with the archives has been stopped. However, I'm optimistic and I hope that the projects are not stopped forever. Yes, various transformations are likely to take place, but there is still a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Inessa. That was quite a nice trip back in time for me. I've been to this place quite a few years back, so thank you very much for such an excursion back in time. And I'm really glad to hear that something is at least planned with this archive. So, but we have to move on in a rapid pace. So I am giving floor to our last speaker of this session, Maira Bunja, Western Michigan University, Emerita. So Maira, please.
I have to mute. Hello. Hi. I will share my screen. And okay, is it showing the slideshow?
Yes, it's on, we see it.
Okay. All right. So, though we would like to think of libraries and other memory institutions as permanent protectors of our history, circumstances change. We know that politics change focus on our institutions, viruses lead to major budget cuts, generous donors provide long-term funding for other institutions. So in November of 2020, the Association of Slavic, East European, and Eurasian Studies held a panel in their virtual conference on Latvian collections in major US libraries, which discussed the Latvian collections. Now, can I move forward? In the Library of Congress, the New York Public Library, University of Washington, and Stanford University. The panelists focused on the history of their collections, which I found fascinating, but I also learned of agreements that mean that only select US institutions are collecting Baltic materials. And at the end, I will also touch on some major changes happening to the Latvian community collections. Grant Harris, recently retired head of the European Division of the Library of Congress, presented a history of the Latvian collection. The Library of Congress was established in 1800 for parliamentarians, but with the addition of Thomas Jefferson's collection in 1815, the library then covered a wide range of subjects. Harris determined that there was not much about Latvia in Jefferson's collection, except for some mentions in the 1878 publication, A Political Survey of the Present State of Europe. In 1866, the library took over 40,000 volumes from the Smithsonian Institution, which included 2 books from the 1520s by Martin Luther in German, addressing the Christians in Riga. But the most important thing that the Library of Congress learned from the Smithsonian was to create exchanges abroad. In 1907, the library purchased the 80,000 item collection of Gennady Yudin, a Siberian merchant and bibliophile. This collection brought in so many Russian language texts that they had to hire Russian speakers to process the materials, which led to the establishment of the Slavic section. Another important event in the early 20th century that influenced the collection was moving the American diplomats from Russia to Riga in 1918. The library received Russian newspapers, books, and documents from Riga, but they also included Latvian materials. The New Slavic section reported that in 1921, 478 Lettish or Latvian publications were purchased. They established an exchange program with the University of Latvia the following year. And the Slavic section chief was Peter Speak, an Estonian. And I need to ask my Estonian colleagues what they know about his tenure at the Library of Congress. It sounds very interesting. Looking at the publication years, the Library of Congress has, 4 books from associated from Latvia from the 16th century, 18 books from the 17th century, 110 from the 18th century, etc. And the oldest book that was published in Latvia that they have is from 1627. Harris guesses that most of these oldest books probably came to the Library of Congress after World War I. And from, for instance, from just the World War II years, Library of Congress only has 180 monographs, a few newspapers from the occupation by the Soviets and Nazis, and some underground materials that most likely came to the US from the US defense agencies. Publications from independent Latvia came to LC through exchanges and diplomats, but many of the books from this era came in recently through the James H. Fraser Baltic collection. This collection mainly supports his 2014 book, Publishing and Book Design in Latvia, 1919 to 1940. From the independence years, there are also 60 books in Hebrew and Yiddish. Some are from the Fraser collection, but others came in after World War II as part of the Jewish cultural reconstruction effort. In 1939, US diplomats in Riga realized that war was coming and sent 93,000 items to the Library of Congress, mostly Russian periodicals, but they also included Latvian materials. In the years under Soviet rule, the Library of Congress received on average about 120 books a year from Latvia. In the 1960s, an approval plan was created with the vendor in Paris that was in place until 1991, when publishing and the book distribution from the former Soviet Union saw major changes. The main source for Latvian books was an exchange with the Latvian SSR State Library. In 1989, Library of Congress employee Eric Johnson visited all 3 Baltic republics and broadened the exchange agreements, especially for independent publications. Since 1991, the Library of Congress receives about 250 to 300 books a year from Latvia and about 50 books associated with Latvia that are published outside of Latvia. Only one exchange partner that remains in the Baltics, and that's the National Library of Latvia. The Library of Congress has over 18,000 monographs from or about Latvia and about 1,000 periodical titles. These numbers are even higher if you include Livonia, Kurzeme, and the Baltics in general. And oops, that number's wrong. And since many titles are multi-volume, and especially periodicals, they consider that they have about 33,000 volumes concerning Latvia. The collection focuses on the humanities, social and natural sciences, with special emphasis on history, language, and literature. And the Latvian materials are also found in other Library of Congress divisions, including American Folklife, the Law Library, Geography and Maps, Performing Arts, and print and photographic material collections. So a full description is available here on this website. It just goes on for pages if anybody wants a more thorough description of what the Library of Congress has. So Bogdan Horbel was actually the one who sort of initiated this whole session in the Slavic Conference. And for, while I was still working actively in the library field, whenever I wanted a place out that was broader than just the AAB's Baltic Studies conferences to talk about Latvian or Baltic materials, the only place was under these Slavic, in East European divisions. Anyway, Bogdan Horval, curator for Slavic and East European collections, talked about the history of Latvian collections at the New York Public Library. And he is working on a more extensive article about the topic. And so some of my information is from the draft of this article that he shared with me. So the New York Public Library was established in 1895, combining a couple of rich guys' personal libraries, Lenox and Astor. It was supported by the Tilden Trust financially. The Lenox collection was known for its collection of Bibles in numerous languages. So amongst the 4,100 Bibles, there was the first translation of the Bible in Latvian by Ernest Glick, Svētā grāmata. Though Astor's collection of Bibles was smaller, that too contained a copy of the Glick translation. Both collections had a few other important 19th century publications from Latvia. And at some point they acquired this rare copy of the 1615 Church Handbook that is considered the oldest existing publication in Latvian. In 1899, the New York Public Library decided to create a Russian literature collection, which included Latvian and Lithuanian languages. This became the Slavonic department, later the Slavonic division. And the department was headed by Hermanis Rozentāls, who was born in Latvia. The US consul in Riga donated books from Riga, as did the mayor of Riga, George Armistead, who wanted people to know about his city. Rozentāls worked with the publisher Kimmel in Riga that provided the library with publications in Russian and German. In 1900, only 400 Latvians lived in New York City, but after 1905, many more arrived and the library started purchasing Latvian literature from Hartnoch publisher and subscribed to the newspaper Strādnieks from Boston. Each yearly report includes the number of Latvian works added, and in 1910, the list included 200 Latvian publications, or almost 1/4 of the whole Slavic acquisitions. In 1923, the then Slavic department head traveled to Europe to purchase books. His wife became ill in Riga, and he and a colleague spent 2 weeks exploring Riga bookstores. They contacted the American minister in Latvia and asked for Latvian governmental and academic publications. An exchange was established with the Latvian State Library, and though books were still purchased from publishers also. In 1931, there were 8,000 Latvians in New York, and some of them donated their books to the library. Through these avenues, there were over 2,000 books in 1935. More than there were in Ukrainian, Bulgarian, or Lithuanian. And government publications continued to come till 1940. I found that in 1945, it was considered the largest collection of Latvian books in the US, but then and eventually they got some Soviet publications, but less and less of those were in Latvian. They tried to balance that with emigre publications purchased from a New York Latvian bookseller. But they did, for instance, microfilm the Latvian newspaper Laiks, published in New York. And actually, on those very first microfilms, my father's name is there because they didn't have the first few issues, and my father had saved them. Jānis Kresliņš Sr. became a consultant on the Latvian materials, and with his encouragement, the department became the Slavic and Baltic division. He was also instrumental in getting Helmārs Rudzīts, the publisher of Grāmatdraugs, the leading Latvian publisher in the US, to donate a copy of each of his publications to the New York Public. In the 1990s, all exchanges ceased, but they continued to purchase what they could. And then in 2014, this was the thing that was kind of new to me. I somehow had missed it. There was an agreement between New York Public with Columbia and Princeton, and later Harvard joined, that they could not all collect in all the small languages, and they were going to divide them up amongst themselves. And then New York Public was designated as the one that is collecting publications in Latvian. And so It has one of the largest collections with 14,000 book titles and over 700 periodicals. The collection covers all time periods, but is especially strong in the years between the world wars. And we can see how that came about. Michael Biggins from the University of Washington. He's the Slavic, Baltic, and East European Studies librarian. He presented on the development of the collection at his institution. And though the university started collecting Russian, East European materials in the 1970s and were collecting minimally from the Baltics in 1970s, it really didn't start until the 1990s. Their university's Ellison Center for Russian, East European, and Central Asian Studies and the Scandinavian Studies Center were interested in the Baltic countries' efforts to work with Northern European countries after regaining independence. They were also impressed by the very active Baltic communities in the Seattle area. So in 1993, Gunther Schmickens arrived with his newly acquired doctorate degree as a guest professor on a trial basis to teach Baltic studies. His qualifications were so rare, with native level language of Latvian and almost equally good knowledge of Lithuanian and Estonian, with a good basis in Russian and German too, for research purposes. He had been in shock when he only found a couple of shelves of Baltic language and literature publications. So the Baltic Studies program was so successful that the university decided to create a full-time permanent professor position for Baltic Studies and hired Gunther Schmickens in that position. And in 1997, when I had to close down the Latvian Studies Center, we sent 12,000 volumes of our books. This is through the American Latvian Association, which also donated a large portion of the proceeds of selling the center building for processing the collection. They established an endowment, which has already acquired $3 million over these years, and involves the local communities. My favorite story is that the book club that meets on a regular basis, every time they meet, each person writes out a check to this endowment fund, sometimes reaching $3,000 a year. So they've been able to, they have about $4,000 a year for purchasing Baltic publications now. And there's an exchange with National Library of Latvia. There was a break after the financial crisis, but they're working to fill in those gaps. The scope of the collection is broad, including arts and humanities, social sciences, etc. But they are very interested in music, especially choral music. The head of their choral music program discovered Baltic choral traditions and have included that in their performances. And so they have 1,200 choral music pieces from the Baltic countries. So many of you Estonians probably know Liisi Esa very well. So she's the curator of Estonian and Baltic studies at Stanford University. And Stanford's a really good example how quickly things can change in libraries. Stanford University libraries as such do not appear in earlier lists of Baltic or Latvian collections. Not even the thorough list that Mr. Kressling compiled in 2002, but now it's one of the more important collections for Baltic studies researchers. Now, Ines Kalning just mentioned Hoover Institution, which is on the campus of Stanford University, but is actually an independent institution, and they obviously have been on those lists. But they work separately, though they do sometimes coordinate their collections. Stanford started collecting in the 20s, but not really until they had a Slavic curator position. And then again, just like all the research libraries, they would gather something until in 2011, they received a large endowment from the Kistler-Ritso Foundation. And Olga Kistler-Ritso grew up in Estonia and worked as an eye surgeon in the San Francisco area. And with this fund, Stanford has developed a Baltic Studies program and hired Liisi Esa as the curator for the collection. They sponsored the 2018 AABS conference. They've held exhibits, support internships. They have a great project digitizing the Museum of Occupation Latvia Audiovisual Archive by also adding transcriptions and translations. So the conclusion from talking to numerous librarians at research institutions, and not only just these four, is that the big institutions will continue to collect academic publications in English about Latvia, but few will continue collecting in Latvian. And as we saw, they will divide up the responsibilities for collecting in smaller languages so that New York Public Library will collect, so that Harvard, Princeton, and Columbia do not have to. I also want to briefly touch on what's happening with the Latvian collections in the community itself. We've had 6 museums in the Latvian community, and currently only one, the Scout Museum, is available to the public. The Ethnographic Museum in Freehold closed. The Latvian Museum in Rockville, Maryland is under major reimagination. It is there, but it will be opening again. COVID has not helped in its progress, but they hope to open up early next year, especially redoing how they present the history of Latvia. The Latvian Folk Art Museum, they sold their building earlier this year, and so their whole folk art collection is in storage, trying to figure out where to put it. And the Latvian Center in Gudazes, the Scout Museum still exists, but the Art Museum and the Folk Art Museum are in storage because the building is no longer viable. So the building you see is the Scout Museum, but you can see all the art pieces, you know, all folded up. We had professionals clean all the folk costumes and put them in plastic boxes for storage. And I collected, I've been packing up the library, and so that's about half of the library. But there's hope for the future. Because of the museums, you know, those need to be rebuilt. So there is a plan to work on a new cultural center at Gudazes in Three Rivers, Michigan, that would talk about the history of Latvians in Michigan. And Gudazes history include the Art Gallery and Museum, the Folk Art Museum, the Scout Museum, Library, and for the first time, archives. We have not had a central place for Latvians to send archives since 1997, when the Latvian Studies Center closed. We hope it will be a cultural gathering place, and we do have this informal group of the American Latvian Cultural Heritage Association, where everybody tries to save local organizational individual archives, but we're working with the American Latvian Association and archivists like Inessa and librarians in Canada and in Latvia, so that we can be more systematic about it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this very informative insight. So we have come to the end of all 4 presentations. So we are a bit over our time, but I think we can take 5 minutes to some quick answers on the questions we have. Right now we have only 2 questions in the chat. If you have some more still, please write them now. And I will read out the ones we have. So the first question goes to Piret from Rina Reinveld. And the question is, Tartu College and VEMU have had really huge program last year and a half. Just curious, how big have been the audience, or which events have been most popular? Piret?
Yes, some numbers I checked. In the meantime, one of our most popular cooking shows was where Ene Timmus was baking rye bread. And it's close to 200 views by now on YouTube, which is really like great number. Other cooking shows have been also quite popular among like 300, over 300, there was some. Peter Põldre's lectures about COVID virus have been really popular. The most popular is close to 600 views by now. And Markus Kolga's lecture about the silver jazz, punk, and rock and roll music, it's also has been very popular, also close to 600. VEMU night TV program, by now it's over 500, and also Baltic commemoration events this Black Ribbon Day and June deportations, which we work together with other Baltic communities, those have been also popular, about 600 views. And I saw that Sebastian joined us. Sebastian, you know what has been the biggest numbers for Estonian Music Week online concerts, like 2,500 or even more. And maybe you can add it to the chat just so we can read it, because I don't remember those numbers. Yep, yeah, 2,500, yeah, for Memories of Home concert series. So comparing to the regular lectures, were usually like a small lecture, it's 20, 30 people. For a regular online lecture, for a live show, it's twice as much usually. Plus the opportunity, if we had the opportunity to go and watch it later on, it really makes sense to first to have them online sometimes, and second, record them and share on YouTube.
Yes, thank you, Piret. And the second question we have in the chat is to Inessa from Birgit Kibal. So was there also some earlier part of Munster Archives collections delivered to the Latvian National Archives in the beginning of 2000s?
Yes, it was a part of mostly what consists of documents from Latvian organization, but the main collection, which are from Gymnasium, is still in Germany.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? Either from the attendees, then you have to type it in the chat, or maybe some of the panelists would like to ask something. You can just
I have a question, Myra, about those American libraries and Latvian collections in them. Have Latvian National Library taken any interest in those collections? And if yes, then how?
Well, they have a exchange program. The Library of Congress still has an exchange program with the National Library, and which is the only national library that they have an exchange program with. And I believe that the New York Public does too. I've already, one of the interesting things that came up in the conference was that what they would most want is really good lists. Like Michael Biggins came across that Latvia published around the 100-year centennial celebration a series of books on kind of the history of Latvia that popular Latvian authors wrote. It was Us in the 20th Century series. And he looked them up, and all of them were somewhere in the United States, maybe from 1 to 5 copies. But he said that's not enough to be preservational, that we need to be more systematic in collecting. And usually the people that are choosing books to collect are, they have to go by. I mean, it would be nice if we could provide very good lists of, you've got to have this, in your collection for those, 4 or 5 institutions and anybody else who might be interested.
Mm-hmm.
So
thank you. Thank you.
So any more questions? We could do one more. No. Okay. Then I think we're done with this session, first one of today's. Thank you very much for all the speakers. Thank you for all the attendees and panelists who listened. Well, just a small break, I think, 5 minutes, 10, and then we'll move on with the next session. Thank you.
Let's start next session. Thank you. So we'll stay in US, but we're moving to Lakewood, New Jersey, to hear how is life at Latvian Estonian Archives in Lakewood. So Ave Maria, Lice, please, you're very welcome.
Thank you. This is my very first Zoom experience ever, so I'm just excited that I was able to log in, and apparently people can hear me and see me at this point. Am I correct?
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Yay, I figured it out. Hi Maya, I see you in Australia. For those that I have not met yet, I am Ave Maria Blythe, an archivist at the Estonian Archives in the United States. In fact, this August marks my 8th year working there. I will keep it short and sweet and hopefully even mildly entertaining. Since our physical location in Lakewood, New Jersey is off the beaten path anyway, we have not experienced a huge drop in visitors during the so-called pandemic. All the researchers and visitors who wanted to tour the facilities were always able to do so as soon as the first wave of panic subsided in the spring of 2020 already. All the archive workers have always attended on a voluntary basis, so it was up to everybody individually whether to continue to come to work or not, also whether to wear a mask or not. I and some other dedicated volunteers continued accepting and sorting through the materials every week. So the routine work at the archive has not been disrupted. Although we do have a web page with basic information, our most operative form of communication continues to be our Facebook page, which has over 860 registered followers as of right now, and keeps growing steadily without any targeted advertising, just via word of mouth or based on the content that we share there. And quite often an official inquiry has developed from a Facebook comment section. Of course, the majority of searches involve trying to track down loved ones who emigrated during or after World War II and with whom contact was lost. Sometimes a person writes along the lines, so-and-so went to live in America via the DP camps, and I know he's buried in Chicago. What can you find out about him? To which I am tempted to reply, well, he is still dead. But of course I do not, and instead attempt to find any information we might have. Recently I received an email from Estonia asking if we might know what happened to the person's great uncle. Many interesting details were included except the name of that uncle. So of course I had to reply that my search would most likely yield much better results if I had the name of the persons they were looking for. I am sure many can relate to this type of inquiries and searches. The topic of Estonian history continues to be quite popular among American students and scholars, as in Americans. With no ties to Estonia. I always ask them, what prompted you to take interest in Estonia if you have no Estonian ancestry? Quite often it is just a happenstance of seeing a film or reading history and then becoming intrigued by the mention of this tiny country, previously unknown to them. And let's be honest, after centuries of research papers, there are not many topics left to write on without risking plagiarism. So the largely untapped topic of Estonia is a great option for American students and researchers. For example, just recently I had the pleasure of assisting a fine young man from Yale University, who is also in the United States Navy. He was looking for materials regarding Admiral Pitka, of all things. His interest was piqued by the fact that Johan Pitka was the founder of Estonian Navy during the War of Independence. I was able to gift him with extra copies of some donated books on the subjects also. This might be a good idea for all the archives wrestling with the issue of too many books. I have set aside a special gift area, so to speak, especially any books on the topic of history, biography of notables, war and DP memoirs, etc. While researchers might not quote them directly in their research papers, they all have been very grateful for this extra information as background information, and have been pleasantly surprised that they may take these types of books home with them for free of charge. As for acceptable source material, in this era of fake news and propaganda, the role of memory institutions, libraries, and archives, in my mind, has become more important than ever. It is very easy to present ideas in digital format and on social media and have it either take on a life of itself like all rumors and gossip do, or then the other extreme, have it fact-checked to oblivion if it does not align with a platform's particular agenda. The only real indisputable truth of historic events can be found in archives, unaltered pen on paper or typewriter documents with proper provenance. By the way, how many of you do you find it interesting that many schools no longer teach handwriting to the children? I find it an interesting coincidence in the era of rewriting history and toppling statues, and considering the fact that old documents most likely are handwritten. By the way, I'm not sure how many are aware of this. Beginning of July this year, even the United States National Archives has placed a new harmful content warning across its entire catalog website. And the warning appears when users search for anything, including founding documents like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. In a statement announcing the new warning, the National Archives said, and I quote, "The catalog and web pages contain some content that may be harmful or difficult to view. The records span the history of the United States, and it is our charge to preserve and make available these historical records. As a result, some of the materials presented here may reflect outdated, biased, offensive, and possibly violent views and opinions. In addition, some of the materials may relate to violent or graphic events and are preserved for their historical significance." I ask you, can this type of political correctness get any more ridiculous? Ridiculous and dangerous, as the next step may very well be that one is prohibited from viewing such harmful content altogether, for our own protection, of course. The various restrictions that were implemented last year and continue even now have proven how quickly the world can change. What started as an unknown biothreat and caused understandable panic has now been revealed as government overreach at best, or even something more sinister. Politics and current events are sometimes unpopular topics, but as researchers and safekeepers of history, it is difficult not to draw parallels to events in the past. Once again, we are faced with government-mandated segregation, restrictions on free speech, and permission to travel. I remind you that on May 29, in 1942, on the advice of Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, ordered all Jews in occupied Paris to wear an identifying yellow star on the left side of their coats. A higher education institution in my homeland, which I will not name by name, in Estonia, now has a system where unvaccinated and therefore undesirables must wear a yellow wristband, and those obedient to the cause wear green. Green as in a new Green Deal, I guess, which promises workers paradise in the New World Order. Those wristbands cannot be removed. To me, personally, that sounds very much like ankle monitors on criminals. Worst of all, once again, it all seems to come down to boiling a frog on a low heat. as you all know, the analogy goes something like that. If you place a frog into a pot of water on the stove, he will not jump out, as the water is not scalding hot yet. The temperature raises slowly. The frog does not even notice it until he is lulled to death. Looking at historical accounts of the 1930s and 40s, for example, we wonder, how could things progress to the atrocities so quickly? Why did people not only resist, but even snitched on their neighbors? The COVID restrictions started with mask mandates and something about 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and now have escalated to restricting the movement and even livelihoods of those who prefer to go by my body, my choice regarding to so-called voluntary vaccination. One of the questions posted for this year's topic was, how has the pandemic affected the lives and livelihood of diaspora communities? To me personally, the most worrisome outcome has been the before-mentioned segregation. Those who do not want the state to stipulate what they must do with their own bodies, the very basic sign of a sovereign being, face or already have been fired from their jobs, are denied an entry to many public places, and are treated like lepers by the self-righteous. Imagine, if you will, a virus so deadly that you have no symptoms and you must get tested to see if you have it. And the vaccinated are so afraid you can infect them with a virus they have been vaccinated against. Imagine if the government demanded to see your HIV status at every turn, or denied entry to handicapped people. We have not been able to gather in person for 2 years now. This is not the new normal. These are dark times. Instead of cattle cars, we are now talking about herd immunity. After each calamity, mankind vows never again, yet here we are. I, for one, do not want history repeating itself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ave, for an intriguing approach. And I hope we'll have some time at the end of the session to discuss there might be some questions. But before that, we go to the bravest people among us, because they had to wake up the second day in a row a little after midnight. And Maya has been with us since yesterday 4 a.m. But the next speaker is not Maya, but Maya's daughter, Christy Barrow. And they both represent Estonian archives in Australia. So Christy first, please, Christy.
Hi, thanks, Piret. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, okay, great. Just double checking. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here today. This is the first time I've been involved in the Balthernet conference. I know my mother's been involved in it for the last, I don't know, 8 years or however long it's been around. And so I thought, given that today's conference or this year's conference is online, that perhaps I could share some of the ways I've been involved in the archive. So just as some background really quickly, I don't have an archive background. I actually a digital data analyst, so probably very far from most of the people on this call today. However, I have volunteered with the archive. So I thought I could maybe share some of the things that I've been helping with last year, especially due to the pandemic, as this may be interesting to all of you. So I'll just share my slides now. Great. So hopefully everybody can see these slides. Excellent. Great. So I believe I have about 20 minutes. I should be a little bit shorter than 20 minutes, but definitely not over 20 minutes. So the things that I was hoping to go through today was essentially just a little bit of an introduction, how we've decided to choose the social networks that we're working with, the types of posts that we started to send out, the results that we've seen so far, and finally a little bit of a tips and tricks list of the things that we've learned along the way. So just as an introduction, I have been involved in the Estonian community in Australia, for quite some time, and I even actually designed the first webpage for the Estonian Archives back in 2001, which looks very, very dated now. So I've been volunteering on and off, I guess, at the archive, and when the pandemic started last year, and I had a little bit of spare time and nobody was able to go into the archive, it seemed like a good time to see what we could do with the digital presence. So we rebuilt the Estonian Archives website, and then decided to go, okay, how could we actually get this out into the world? So we realized that we needed to do some kinds of promotions. So the first topic I wanted to talk about a little bit about is choosing social networks. There are quite a lot of social networks out there. However, there's probably the really big ones that most people know about, and Ave spoke about Facebook earlier with her archive. Really, you want to look at the networks that have your intended audience participating. So we went and looked at, decided on 3 social networks to focus on, but our absolute main focus was Facebook. Most of the people that we wanted to reach were on Facebook. There's quite a few Facebook groups. There's the Australian Estonians group, there's the Baltics in Australia group, Estonian Society of Sydney. There's also quite a lot of groups from the other cities in Australia as well. And so this was definitely the place that we wanted to get our message out to. Just in case anyone's interested in following, I do have these QR codes on the bottom right-hand side. These have been very popular in Australia as we need to check into a lot of the places that we need to go into. So if you do have your mobile phone and would like to follow us, you just need to scan that code with your camera and you'll be able to follow us, and we definitely appreciate that. So what we've been doing with our Facebook presence is posting pretty much everything, right? There's definitely a diverse group of people who use Facebook. So really any type of news that we have, we will post on Facebook. And so far we're at 250 likes. I'm not sure what we were when we started this, but a lot less. Our Facebook presence, even though we had one probably for a few years, was only posted to very, very sporadically and didn't have much of a following. So we've grown this in just over a year and a bit. And I think for a small community volunteer archive in Australia about Estonians, I think that's a pretty good number. The second network that we looked at was Instagram. And really, one of the reasons why using Instagram is that it's a great place to post pictures. So the archive has some really interesting things in the archive, and it seemed like a good place to be able to highlight this. The other important thing with Instagram is predominantly used by mobile. Just about everybody uses mobile for Instagram. So if you want to think about that as to when people are viewing and how they're viewing Instagram. And finally, probably the main reason we decided to open an Instagram account is that it's very easy to sync the posts with Facebook. So essentially we could put something on Facebook and with a click of a button also post it to Instagram. Now, given that, again, the archives is completely volunteer run and we don't have a lot of time, being able to do things efficiently was super important as well. So again, we're sort of posting everything to Instagram, and we have 124 followers. Not a huge amount, but certainly growing, and half the number that we have on Facebook. Again, QR code if anyone would like to follow our Instagram. And finally, LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the largest professional network, largest professional social network in the world at the moment, at least in the English-speaking world. And really, we haven't done much on LinkedIn, and I'd like to probably start changing that. But it's definitely the place to promote the professional activities. So currently we have, I think, 12 followers. So I saw there was 18 people on this call, and if we take out my mother and myself, I'm hoping we might be able to get 16 more today. So please follow us. We certainly want to look at trying to share more sort of industry relevant and archival relevant stuff within LinkedIn. So they're the 3 that we focused on. We didn't want to spend any more time on anything else, just purely because we don't have a lot of resource here. So this, I think, hopefully you'll find this a bit interesting. this is the types of posts that we put out. So generally what we found when we were looking at this was that there's about sort of 6 different types of posts that we used for Facebook and Instagram. Really, we had interactive posts, we had on this day posts, we have stories from the archive, we have special announcements, general information, and some series. So I'll go through a couple of examples that we had here. So firstly, the interactive posts. So the plan for the interactive posts was to actually get people interacting with them. So the idea was to get people involved. So what we've been using is a Do You Know Who I Am series. So Do You Know Who I Am has a picture, a photo of where we don't know everybody who is in the photo. And we put up this little sketch and numbers of all the people, and have asked people if they can help us name or find out who some of these people are. So this one was, I believe, from Adelaide Children's School or Saturday School in the, I think, 1950s. I cannot remember. And this was great. We ended up having 50 comments on this post. Now, I think previous to that, the most comments we've ever had on a post was about 8. So this definitely hit the mark with what we were trying to achieve, which was get people involved. And of the 27 people in here, we were successfully able to identify 22 of them. I think we knew about 5 of them at the start. So in addition, we got an extra 17 people identified off the back of this Facebook post. So this one was quite successful. The second type of post we have were on this day. So we take a day in the year and try and find something relevant in the archive that we can talk about. So the first one we did, I think, was Victory Day, which is June 23rd. We put up a post with the front page of the 1956 Meergoddel newspaper. So that's was the national newspaper of Estonians in Australia. And we talked a little bit about Victory Day. The second one we've done so far was on this day when the president visited the archives back in 2018. And we put up a little blurb and a link to an interview that Ale from the archive did with the president. So that was really good. And finally, this is an interesting one because this has actually been our most, well, not successful, but our most reached post out there is Moon Day. Happy Moon Day. So on the July 20th of 1969, and July 20 was the anniversary of, I think, NASA, the astronauts flying to the moon, and an Estonian flag was actually flown to the moon by these astronauts. And this is something that we have in the archive, which is a letter from a United States senator signed by some of the Apollo, I think, 16 crew. I put it up because I thought it was interesting. I did not actually believe that it would get so much interest from people who are interested in space stuff, I guess. Stories was another really good one that we've been trying to do, and I'd love to do more of. And we have two stories that we promoted that we had quite a lot of people click on and go on to read the link. So the first one was the story behind the new archive logo. This was designed by a young Australian of Estonian heritage, Lachlan Bell, and he actually spoke as to how he developed this new logo for the archive. I think previously the logo was about, I'm going to guess about 15 years old. And again, you know, as design happens, quite dated. So he had designed a fresh new logo as part of his university project. And the second one was actually a story written by my godmother, Red Simmel, who wrote about how her time at the archive. And so we decided to put this on, oh, sorry, I'll take a step back. Originally, this was a biography for the website, which was, instead of being a paragraph long, I think it was about 3 pages. So I thought, well, this is some great stuff, not relevant for the biography. So let's actually make a news article out of it. So this is a great story from my godmother, Red, about why she works at the archive. Special announcements is another key one, where really important things that have happened where we talk about. So I believe my mum will be talking a little bit about this Mahatma of the Baltics down the track, but the first one was about the funding we received from the Estonian Cultural Foundation in Australia. The second one was about the very exciting news that the oral histories were going to be inscribed in the UNESCO Memory of the World Register. I hope I got that one right. And another special announcement we had was one of the board members, actually, I apologize, I don't think it's the board of the archive, I think it's a committee or something, achieved an award, Dr. Terry Cass. So, you know, this is a really good place to just put out those special announcements. And some of this stuff is very relevant to something like LinkedIn, where it's tied into, you know, your professional network. Informative, so these are just pretty much straightforward posts around things that have happened. The first one was the online exhibition that we put up, The Great Escape. The second one was an announcement of a new acquisition that we had to the archive, which was a children's book written by an Australian author that was translated into Estonian. And finally, a notice that the archive was back open again. We were lucky that we were able to open up again, I think late last year, possibly October. So we were able to put an announcement there. And the final type of post we have was some series posts. And this was going on a theme. And this theme really was, you know, as we were a voluntary organisation and we were always looking for funding, and I'm sure a lot of you are always looking for various funding, we went out to our audience to raise some money, especially so that we could digitise our UNESCO recognised oral history collection. So this was really important to have, I guess, timing and context and what we were trying to do. So the first thing was we went out in June. So like a lot of countries, but not all of them, our tax time runs from July to June. So June is always a really good time to try and approach people for money that is tax deductible. And the Estonian Archive has a fund which has tax deductible status. So we went out in June to do our fundraising, and then we were quite clear with what we were fundraising about. Secondly, we then went up with a follow-up, I think about 2 weeks later, that we were actually getting really close to the amount of money that we needed to fully digitize the collection. And then finally, we did a thank you post to say, hey, everybody, thank you very much for being involved in this. We really appreciate it. So those are the types of posts that we've been doing. And generally, we find that anything we do fits in one of those themes. And I've attempted where possible to do a mix of different types of content to send out to people. So results that we've had so far, and you know, I think as a smaller archive, you know, I think we're all quite proud of these results. You know, it's still very small numbers, but we are definitely getting through to the people that we're hoping to get through to. So if we go through a couple of these things, this Happy Moon Day post on Facebook had a reach of 2,900. So that's 2,900 people, according to Facebook, who saw this post, which I, to be honest, was kind of astounded about. This is the other one I spoke about earlier, the Do You Know Who I Am post. This had 50 comments on it. And so, you know, that was great from a interactivity perspective. Engagement. So engagements in Facebook is really just a sum of different things people can do. They can comment, they can Claire, and they can comment, share, and click. Sorry, not Claire. And when we talked about launching our new website, that was probably the most engaging post. And this was an opportunity to go out to our audience and say, hey, we've got some new stuff coming up. Please pay attention. And finally, shares. So the book, The Big Dead Dry, which was by an Australian author of Estonian descent, that had the most shares at 14. And what we did definitely find is that when content was shared, the reach increased quite substantially. And so that's definitely something that you should look at doing, is encouraging people to share your content. Just a couple of other results I'll go through. I don't want to bore people too much with figures. So these are the top posts that we had by reach. And as I mentioned before, the Happy Moon Day had the highest reach, but also the different types of posts that we have also helped. So our new website live had a high reach. A new book, the archive has put up a new exhibition. So these are sort of the top Facebook posts. And we also got a lot of posts in that sort of around 1,000 people reach, which I thought was, you know, really quite good. So all up since about the end of May, beginning of June, when we launched the new webpage, we've had a Facebook reach of about 10,400. So that's sort of 10,000 unique people on Facebook that have been reached with something from the Estonian Archive. So I think that's a really huge number, and a much bigger number than I ever would have thought was possible for us. So really quite proud of that. And you can just definitely see that the peaks for something like Facebook come when you post. So these are the different posts. You can see the Moon Day post that's going on there. And the most recent post that got the biggest reach was the new book for the archive, The Big Dead Dry. Who is our audience? So I just thought this would be interesting. Facebook does give you a little bit of information around who the audience is when you look in the insights area. And you can see that our actual audience of here around the likes is definitely skewed to female, but what I thought was quite interesting was quite consistent across the age groups. So it wasn't, only one age group. We've got a lot of people, like our highest age group for Facebook was 25 to 34-year-old women. And so I think that's also good to know and good to start thinking about, because we certainly wanted to be reaching all ages with the archive posts, not just people of my generation or people of my mum's generation. We wanted to get the younger people so they could carry on sort of the legacy of the archive. And finally, I did just want to share one result around resharing. So as I mentioned before, we only have 12 people following us on LinkedIn, and I'd love for you all to follow us on LinkedIn. So I put up a note just a couple of days ago around, okay, we're going to be speaking at the Balthernet conference. So to promote not only just this conference, but also to promote the archive. And you can, not sure if you can see down here, it might be a little bit small, but we had 40 organic impressions when I grabbed these numbers yesterday. So that's not very many, but it's still more than none, which is great. However, I also shared this post to my own network. I should preface this is that my network is probably not our audience. I don't have a lot of people that I'm networked with in the archival area or in history. Again, I'm a numbers digital person. So this is not necessarily reaching the exact audience, but you can see when I shared this, we had 634 views. So this is definitely something to think about when you're creating any content, is to get people who have larger networks to help share it so you can help amplify it. This has made a really big difference with everything we've done. Anytime we've shared anything on Facebook or LinkedIn, we've increased the reach dramatically. So certainly encourage people to do that. I think, how am I going on time? I think I'm going pretty well. So I just thought I would finish with maybe the 5 things that we've learned that perhaps could help anybody here who is looking at promoting their work through social media. So the first one was Facebook gives us the biggest reach, so we're focusing most of our effort there. I'm probably the main social media person for the archive. Some of the other volunteers also do help. But we don't have a lot of resources. So if we're going to focus our time somewhere, we're going to focus it on the place with the biggest audience, and that has been Facebook. So whenever we've been creating something, I've essentially been creating it for Facebook. Secondly, there's no such thing as oversharing. You might think you're sharing a lot. The way the algorithms work, the way people come in and out of social media, if you share something to different groups within Facebook, or you ask different people to share it, it's just going to amplify. Nobody is going to say, oh, look, the Estonian Archives, they just keep sharing too much stuff, right? If they do, they're probably just on social media too often. So I highly encourage you to look at sharing things. We shared things to the Australian Estonians group. That's a group that Anne Smith, who I know is speaking later today, created. I'm not sure how long ago. That's a great group. It's got about 1,200 people, I think, in it. That group, I believe, is private. There's also public groups, so think about that. So just make sure that you look at sharing content that's relevant to the people who might be interested. If people are not interested, don't worry, they will scroll right past. People have the attention of a goldfish these days. So if they're not interested, they'll just keep going. You might just need to hit one person who'll get some great information out of it. Number 3, plan posts around significant events and days. We've found that's a really good way to have a bit of a hook and a way to connect. So think of the important, perhaps national days for your country, or things that have happened in the past, things that, 10th anniversaries, 50th anniversaries, or just any general on this day is always a good excuse to come up with something if you have a relevant story to tell. Number 4, create for scale and efficiency. So this is something that when I first started, I was creating slightly different things for Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. Right now, I pretty much create one post. I have a square picture because squares work on Instagram, and I share it everywhere. This has just made it easier and quicker to get things out. Ideally, you would be able to spend time curating your content exactly for your audience. But the reality that we have is that we don't have a lot of people working on this, and we don't have a lot of time. So we're creating things for scale and efficiency. And I think overall that gives us a better reach and gets our message out there than if I was spending my time creating 3 separate posts for 3 different social networks. And my final tip is to tag. So you can tag people and places in both Facebook and LinkedIn, also in Instagram, and use relevant organizations and people as well as keywords. The way people search for things is different. Some people actually search on keywords in LinkedIn and Facebook. Some people don't. Some people follow groups. Some people follow pages. Everyone does stuff differently. So you should want to give yourself like the biggest chance to get your message out there. And I think time-wise, I've gone okay. So Pirit, hopefully that was all right. So I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank Pirit for allowing me to speak today. And I hope you found this useful. I'm not sure if we're doing questions now or if we're doing that at the end of the session. So I'll hand over to Pirit. Here's my contact details. Again, QR code, which is my new favorite thing. If you want to scan that with your phone, that'll take you to a little page which has my contact details if anyone would like to ask me any questions after this. So thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Yes, we'll have a Q&A at the end of the session. It's so good to see that the Barrow family is growing. Your Baltic Heritage Network is growing. It's most welcome. And I enjoy your very professional work you have done on your social media presence. Really, congrats. You're doing a great job. We'll talk about it later more. But next, yeah, Maya Barrow, one of our veterans for Baltic Heritage Network, has been with us from the very, very beginning. Maya, floor is yours.
Hello, can you see me?
Yes, we can.
And can you see my, oh dear, I seem to have ended up with the wrong ones. Okay. Yes, can you see my slides?
Not
No, not yet, Mum.
Okay, so what have I done wrong?
Find the button, share screen.
Let's see what we're,
Green one.
hang on, I have to go out and come in again, I think. In slideshow, right. Now, I had some instructions on how to do this, so perhaps I need to do it again. This is my first Zoom show, so let's start. Okay, open Zoom box, join with video, share screen. Where do I get to the?
So that's the bottom
green button.
I don't have it on this one yet. Okay. Share, yeah, share screen, okay. Anything happening? Right, now.
Now you should see your desktop.
Now on that and share, right.
Press the blue button, that's the key one.
And now, what happens here? Why have I got to
open your PowerPoint.
Open my PowerPoint. Oh, damn, have I closed my PowerPoint? Sorry, folks.
That's all right. That's it, I think.
There we go.
Okay, and you made it.
Click.
Yep, that's the one. Click the slideshow.
Click the slideshow. Okay. Not now. Okay. Clicks.
It's on the bottom.
On the bottom, Mum. Yep, that's it.
Okay. Can you see this now?
Yes, you did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Sorry about that, folks. Hi, I'm Maya from Australia on a 6 a.m. lovely spring day. Greetings from us all. As Biret said, I have been at all the conferences so far, but this is my first Zoom conference, and I know it's a leap forward in technology, but I'm an archivist and I like the old things. I must say, I would much prefer to see you all in the flesh rather than, actually not at all, but we must learn new things, and why not in a time of COVID when life is very different. On the bottom of the screen, there is a QR code, which Christy mentioned before. You can photograph that either now or on my last screen, and that will take you straight through to the web page. And it also has a link to all the links that we will be using today. Now, due to COVID-19, Australia's had some form of restriction or lockdown since March last year. And our archive is run entirely by volunteers, so we're not regarded as essential workers. So most of the time we haven't been able to work. And Estonian House is a cultural centre which has been closed. So in fact, we probably have had less than 1 month's work in the last 18 months. We've tried to keep working. We can't come together, but we've tried to keep on working. So some of the volunteers have taken parts of Valdemar Wilder's extensive collection and are sorting that at home. Others are working on the plan for moving our archive. For those who have visited us, we are upstairs in Estonian House. We are now moving downstairs in Estonian House, and the move is a logistical nightmare, but we are going on with it. We are still very enthusiastic and very committed, and we have used the time that we had to do some new things, which Christy mentioned, was create the logo and create a new web page. Our web page is really our window to the world, and it introduces our activities and our news and our exhibitions and features, and we're really delighted with the response. In our holdings section on the web page, we have a link to the personal papers which are catalogued and can be accessed through the National Archives of Estonia, due to the National Archives of Estonia, and the in memoriam notices, which get used a lot for family history and those sort of inquiries that Ave Maria mentioned, where you are asking for an uncle, but they forget to tell you what uncle's name was. We are also looking at putting up our records of the organizations and the DP camp records. They are in process and they're probably the next ones to go. However, we have started putting our exhibitions online. The first one is already there and can be viewed from our webpage, but this is our latest one. This is an exhibition in a series of exhibitions where we started with leaving Estonia, the DP camps, the trips to Australia. But this one is an overview of really the 5 waves, perhaps, of Estonian arrivals in Australia. Since we can't have any visitors, this is the way we thought that we could actually keep the interest going. And as Biret said, that a lot of people view, I'm not quite sure how many people have viewed this, but it's there for the viewing. The first arrivals. I'm always very proud to say that the first Estonians arrived in Australia in 1696, which people then correct me and say, you mean 1996 or 1896? And I say, no, 1696. I will read you an extract from Mana, number 58, 1988, written by Valdemar Wilder. 3/4 of a century before Captain Cook discovered and mapped the east coast of New Holland, now known as Australia, the Dutchman, Captain William de Vlamingh, on the instructions of the Dutch East Indies Company, explored the west coast of the mysterious Southland. They sighted the coast on Christmas Day, 1696. 4 days later, they anchored on an island which Fleming named Rottnest Island because of the strange creatures that lived there. On the 5th of January, they landed on the mainland where they measured and mapped the area. To gather hitherto unknown flora and fauna, they ventured inside for 80 kilometers. They saw black swans for the first time on a river they called Swan River. Until then, they had only heard of black swans in fairy stories. Amongst Fleming's ship's roll of international crew were the following names: Barend Jans, sailor from Tallinn; Martin Ostaipen, sergeant from Tallinn; Christian Kaius, lance corporal from Tartu; and Karel Hendrik Kriel, soldier from Livonia. Despite the Dutch-style spelling of the names, there are enough reasons to think these are seafarers from Estonia. That's the end of the article. I have a story that I tell everybody who comes to the archives. And until I'm proved wrong, it's my story and I'm sticking to it. Estonians have always been a seafaring nation, so it's not surprising that we find Estonian sailors everywhere in the world. However, we were always the workers and never the bosses. So it is feasible that our 4 brave Estonian sailors were the ones who rowed the boat from ship to shore, jumped in the water, pulled the boat up onto the sand so that the officer wouldn't get his feet wet. So we were here first. We were here before Fleming's officers, and we were certainly here a long time before Captain Cook. And that is my story, and I'm sticking to it. The next wave of Estonians came in the 1800s, and the exhibition is the story of the Ainsaar family. Gustav Ainsaar was a ship's captain from the Caucasus who arrived in Australia in 1896. He bought some land north of Sydney and worked there as a coal miner. Because he was close to the ports of Newcastle and Sydney, he was able to help Estonian sailors jump ship when they arrived in Australia. Back in the 1890s, that was quite the normal way to arrive. Together with Jakob Lukats in the center photograph on my left and Adolf Goldberg, he set up the first Estonian-Australian society, Lõunamaa, Southland, in 1912. It lasted for about 18 months, but then, as like most Estonian societies, it fell apart because of bickering. Jakob Lukats went on to start the Melbourne Estonian Society in 1914, and the Melbourne Estonian Society is the longest lasting society that we have here. Ainsaar raised a large family. His 2 daughters went to university and became school teachers, which was almost unheard of in those days. They in turn raised their brothers who became policemen. And one son, Lennart, rowed for Australia in the Berlin Olympics, and we have correspondence where he mentions seeing the Estonian team in Berlin. His daughter Elizabeth married Arvid Mielen, who was the honorary vice consul for Estonia before World War II. Arvid Mielen was a violinist and a music teacher and he took part in a lot of the Estonian activities, being the person who presided at the opening of the Estonian House in 1940. There was another round of migration in the 1920s. August Bildt came in 1926 to Australia and started a poultry farm in Thirlmere. He did really well and persuaded his family to join him. A couple of years ago, they had a Bildt reunion and there were 300 descendants. The Lira family, who you see in this picture, were related to the Bildts and came out in 1939, just before the war. Edward didn't have enough money to buy a farm, so he leased 28 acres of virgin bush, and within 2 months of help with his family and friends and hard work, he had cleared the bush, built a poultry house and bought chickens. Poultry farming and orchardists were 2 pastimes that the Estonians in Thirlmere or Thirlmere as it is, but we call it Dilmere, participated in. And at one stage, Dilmere was almost an Estonian village. Eduard was a very generous man with time and support. He was a founding member of the Thirlmere Estonian Society, a supporter of the church and the Scouts, and offered his farm as a venue for a lot of the functions. His children, Valdur and Heljo, grew up in this tight, active Estonian community in Thirlmere and participated in folk dancing and Scouts and Guides, Saturday school languages, the kind of things that all Estonian communities do. The children, unfortunately, did not take to the farming life and moved to the city, which also was the fate of most of the families there in Thirlmere. Post-World War II. World War II was the time when we had most migrants arriving. About 6,000 Estonians arrived in Australia after World War II. And in the first slide, you see a family united in Outer Harbour. Well, this is the story of the Talmud family. It's actually my story. I'm the little girl with the big white bow in her hair arriving with my mother, and my father is standing on the dock waiting for me. For us, he came a year before we did. After a couple of weeks in a migrant camp, we moved to the city and joined the small but very active Estonian community. And in no time, we were having Scouts and Guides. You see the Adelaide Guide Troop with me centre back. We had folk dancing, we had Saturday School of Languages, we had sport. And for young Estonians of my generation, Estonian House, which Adelaide bought in 1957, was the home away from home. We spent our weekends there with Saturday school, Scouts, Guides, folk dancing, the social activities. And I think the commitment to maintaining Estonian culture and heritage that was taught to us or put into us by our parents in our community at that stage lasts to this day, and it's repeated across all the Estonian communities in Australia. And in the next one, you can see that now that I live in Sydney and I'm the archivist for the Estonian Archives, we have a bunch of volunteers, mostly my generation, as you can tell, who are dedicated to protecting the Estonian culture and heritage here in Australia. This picture is actually taken at a Balthernet summer school. I think it's probably the one in Viljandi. The last lot of migrants that have been coming have come since Estonia's independence, and this one is Kadri's story. Kadri grew up in Tallinn and spent a lot of time either at the family summer holiday place in Võsu or with her grandparents in Viljandi. And while she was studying at Tallinn University, she was working in a tourist expo in London where she met an Australian, Nick Stamos, and the romance was pretty short-lived because they both had to return home. But as things happen these days, the romance continued with emails and phone calls. In 2002, Kadri came out and visited Nick in Australia. And in 2003, Nick braved an Estonian winter to go and visit Kadri in Estonia. They married in 2005, but bureaucracy is not kind to young lovers here in Australia. 3 days after the wedding, Kadri had to go back to Estonia because her visa had expired. Took 2 months to get a visa sorted out again so that she could come back. But despite all the hassles, Kadri doesn't regret coming to Australia. It was 3 years before she met any Estonians. She was standing in a supermarket queue and heard people speaking Estonian. And that led her to the Estonian community in Sydney. Kadri became a very active member of the community. She worked in the honorary consulate. She worked for the newspaper Meie Kodu and served on many committees. You can see the Shrove Tuesday was Kadri's speciality. She unfortunately has retired to raise a family, but we hope to have her back. the web page has been our window to the world. It's really opened up opportunities that we didn't have before, although we did have a previous web page. As Chrissy said, it was pretty old, but this one has really, really made a difference to us. When we got the foundation grant from the Estonian Cultural Foundation, we put up the notice that we had been given this money. The Cultural Foundation likes being acknowledged. And much to my amazement, about a week after this went up, I was contacted by a Buddhist priory in Canada saying that they had the manuscript and they had already digitized it. And there was no point in us digitizing ours. So after emails backwards and forwards, they sent us their digitized copy and a book that they had printed but not published, and lots of photographs, and we have a good relationship with them, and they have allowed us to share our digitized copy with anybody who is interested, which is really very, very kind of them. Imbi Neme got in touch with the archive to ask us whether we wanted to have a copy of her book, which had a very good review, and we're always happy to have anything from the Neme family. So we said, yes, of course. So she sent us the book and we put up the notice as the newest acquisition for the archive. As a result of that, another Estonian Australian author, Portia Stanton Noble, sent us her book. And as a big surprise, we were contacted by an Australian author, Nata More, who had had her book, Secrets of a Schoolyard Millionaire, taken up at a German book fair by an Estonian publisher and translated into Estonian. And she was so pleased with that she wanted us to have a copy of the Estonian version. So we do have one, and we're very happy to have that. So any budding authors out there, if you're Estonian Australian, we're happy to have you. But the big, big thrill for us for the year was having our oral history collection inscribed into the UNESCO Australian Memory of the World Register. This came as a complete surprise. The committee, which is based in our National Library, got in touch with us and asked us, would we like to be considered? So this meant that we had to race around and get all our information together. Fortunately, our videos had been catalogued, so we could get a collection sorted out. Terry Cass, our chairman, submitted the grant, the application, and we waited. And then, much to our delight, we were told that we had been accepted. And on the 26th of February 2001, very close to Estonian Independence Day, our collection was actually inscribed into the register. Well, it's such a good collection and videos don't last forever. So we thought that we would have the collection digitized, but we didn't have the money. So we applied to the Estonian Ministry for Education and Research for funding, and we did get funding, but not all that we asked for. We asked the Cultural Foundation in Australia whether we could use the money ascribed to digitizing the manuscript for the videos. They said yes, and we had some money from previous donations, but it wasn't enough. So in the month of June, we decided to run a fundraising appeal. Now, the problem is that at that time, the Council of Estonian Societies was also running their fundraising appeal, and we couldn't really clash with them. So we decided to do a very short and sharp collection. So the first appeal went up. We explained why we wanted the money, how much money we had, and how much money we needed more to finish the program. This went up, and amazingly, within a matter of days, the money started coming in. About a week or two later, we put up a reminder, because the month was getting on, to say that we were nearly there. And this really inspired another flood of monies, so that we actually got more than we needed. So we sent out thank you notes to everybody that had donated and explained that the excess money would be used to digitize the Estonian festival videos. We also set up a page for Friends of the Archive 2021, and anyone who donated more than $200 had their name inscribed on this list. Actually, nearly all of the donations were over $200. So we were very, very pleased with this particular campaign. And there we are. We're back at the end. We've had a good run where I just get to my last slide. Now that we have had the first lot of these videos digitized, we come to the hard part of cataloging the videos and making them accessible. Now, due to Copyright and Privacy Act, we can't have them on open access. And I'd be really happy to hear from others who have gone through this process and faced these problems and hopefully come up with some solutions. So please, if you have any advice to offer, please do so. I'm happy to have questions, but if we don't have time now, my contact details are up here on this slide. You can always get in touch with me later. We're trying to build up our networks, as Christy said, so please follow us on LinkedIn and on social media. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you very much. All yours, Piret.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. If you could now stop sharing the screen, thanks so much.
So
yeah, it definitely looks like we'll have time for questions at the end of the session. But first, thanks very much. Congrats on your great work, as always. Everything is under control in Australia. Every time I hear Maya, I am convinced that the archive is in good hands. But let's go to the last speaker, and she's also Anne Tunder-Smith is also from Australia, and she's representing Canberra and District Historical Society, and talking about research and blogging, which was a hot topic yesterday already. So Anne, if you are there, please show yourself. Show us.
I'm right here, so I don't know why you can't see me.
Yes, we can see you. Hello. Tere, tere.
Tere, tere. Sveiki, hey, hello, and let's go into screen sharing. Now, I do not want to share that. So let's go back to Zoom and let's try and find our Zoom show. And I'm apparently now screen sharing, except I can't see it because Zoom's on top. There we go. And we've not, can you now see the start page?
We can see the first slide, thanks.
And is there a strip of presenters over on the left as there is for me, so I can't see the left-hand side? No?
Yes, everybody's got them.
Everybody's got the full slide?
No, the presenters.
Oh, all right. Just as well, most of mine are left justified. And I apologise for boring black on white, but I didn't have Christy Barrow to prepare mine. However, I thought a little colour would do. So for a very long time, at least since 2007, when I managed to publish a book, I think Maya Barrow and others have been saying to me, when is the next book coming out? I got diverted, as people do, and I began to think that really the best way to draft a book is to share the draft pages by blogging. This is a sample page, and rather than putting my own beautiful portrait up, I've actually put my mother's portrait up there because she's part of the group that I'm blogging about, the 839 people, mainly from Lithuania and then from Latvia, but 140 from Estonia, who came to Australia. They left Germany on the 30th of October 1947 on a American Army ship chartered by the IRO. They arrived in Australia on the 28th of November, so 1947, so it took only 4 weeks. It was an incredibly speedy ship. Your average ship to Australia took 6 weeks then. This amazing man from Latvia not only taught himself how to build houses in Australia, but also taught himself how to build Australian communities. He was active in so many organisations that it takes about 2,000 words to describe what he did. And I was able to meet with his widow, first of all, about 15 years ago, and then eventually I had 3 sons helping me put his story up. So what I have so far, having started in October last year, is an introduction and also a biography of General Stuart Heintzelman, who the first ship was named after. I'm trying to not focus on the Estonians and the women who I've actually found the easiest to contact and collect information on. But given that half the ship was Lithuanians, they should get their fair share. So far I have 7 biographies, if you include Stuart Heintzelman. And in addition to all the tips that Christy was giving to us, one that sticks in my mind for blogging is post frequently or followers lose interest. I'm not actually sure that I have any followers. They haven't declared themselves, but I also have a Facebook group specifically for the families of the descendants of people from the first transport. So far, without me doing much prowling around the web, I have 68 people on that group. And of course, every time I put a new blog up, I can tell them about it. What I find so far with blogging is that people do not use the comments page or window at the bottom to leave their comments. They contact me directly. So I'm definitely getting lots of lengthy reaction. I'd rather it was in the comments box because that, of course, leads other people to comment. So obviously individuals create blogs, although I think the way blogs are set up is one person posting anyhow, but I'm talking, if anyone's still up at midnight or midnight in North America or 6 a.m. in Australia. I see Maya's still up, thank you. we're talking to a group of people who are basically collectors of Baltic heritage rather than individuals. And I think blogs are worth considering in addition to the means of contact with the public that Christy covered, because they provide yet another public means of access. These sorts of articles that Christy and Maya have been putting up on the webpage could also go on a blog, and they, of course, demonstrate the value of the collection. You might have someone who's interested in writing but not interested in culling other people's papers and indexing them and so on. So there's another person that you can add to your team, and not only with the blogging, but helping write the other means that you have of contacting the public. And the reason why I'm doing it is that it makes more Baltic stories public for people who might happen to be searching them. I think blogging has advantages over traditional writing, especially for me, in that I haven't got the second book ready yet, but it's a fast way of publishing. You don't have to worry about the length of what you're writing. It's incredibly easy for you to edit and amend. It might be a way of drafting something more long-lasting, because I think Maya taught me that paper lasts forever. Who knows how long anything digital will last. And I've joined a Facebook group which is for Australians who blog about Australian family history, basically, but I'm blogging biography, so I'm acceptable. And one of the first problems I discovered there was that somebody who was blogging about Irish family history had been told by one of the WordPress or Blogspot that their blog had been identified as breaching their standards on violence or goodness knows what. So it had been taken down. And if that person objected to the taking down, they had the opportunity to log their objection, which they did, and they were put back up. But you just don't know what's going to happen to your blog in the digital world. You also lack the editorial support of a traditional publisher, but given that there's so much co-publishing going on these days, I think you'd be very lucky to find your actual traditional publisher who wanted to give you the full support that a traditional publisher might offer. And my third point there is not just about being taken down because someone's objected, but you really do not know in this world, this interconnected global world, when, I don't know, Disney might buy Google. It's probably going to be the other way around, and make a commercial decision that the blog site that you've been using is just going to disappear. So back up and archive. I think really having a backup on your own computer and your own backup media is extremely important. Now, at this point, I wish I'd been part of yesterday's discussion on blogging. I might be repeating what was said, but it's been enough to drag myself out of bed at 5:30 this morning. So I'm really glad that this has been recorded and I can go back and see what others have to say. So this slide is a bit repetitive, except that I'm going to say that I have 4 more. I've got 8 up so far in all the 9 months, 11 months since I started. So that is not frequent blogging. I've told the people who take up the majority of my time, and I'm not really representing them here today, I'm representing myself. I, as a Balthernet member, that I really can't spend as much time as I have on their project, because as I seem to have been single-handedly doing the first transports over the last 20 years, although at least one other person has popped up and then gone. So I should be posting more frequently, but at the moment I am editing a biography of the grandfather I never knew, by his granddaughter in Lithuania. So families certainly did get split by the Great Escape, and in this case the father would have known that he had a son left behind in Lithuania. I've found another Lithuanian with very skilled children, so I've suggested they've got the skill set to write up his biography. I've also found that it's easier to write biographies yourself if they haven't left family and children behind, which is the case with the artist Carl Mundberg, who would be well known to the archives, but thanks to Maya, I have some of his works in my home. And then I realised, talking with the Sliuzes family, that they had no idea of even the route that he took to get to Australia. So that's another easy one for me to put up. And I've already pointed out to you that half the passengers were Lithuanian. So despite my Estonian background, they're the ones I should be concentrating on, but I might finish up with one entry containing a very long list saying, what do you know about these people? On the other hand, I have 2 active reporters and collectors of Lithuanian origin helping me. I don't think the Lithuanian Archives in Australia is a member of the Baltic Heritage Network, but they have a very active archivist, and they also have someone now resident in Canberra who's doing his own research and posting newspaper photos of the first transport whenever he finds them, so onto the Facebook page. So he is of tremendous help. Back to a bit of colour. I don't have her portrait at the top of this blog entry, but I do have the tomatoes that she bred for Australians. This is Helgi Nierk. For a while, these tomatoes actually featured at the start of one of our TV programs as heritage produce, although they were actually bred in the 50s or 60s by someone who arrived from Estonia in 1947. Her story was already covered briefly by someone called Ino Saliso, whose father was for a time the Estonian, well, he was the founding archivist, I think, wasn't he, Maya? No, not the founding archivist. Anyhow, the second. Thank you. So it's a small community, it's interconnected. Inno contributed to a book on the Baltic people in Australia that was one of a series published in 1988 for the bicentenary of Australia. And he included Helgi Nierk, but I was lucky enough to get her contact details and visit her 3 delightful times in what had been her nursery, and eventually talked to her executors about passing her professional papers on to the Estonian archives in Australia. So I was very happy to do that. I've probably run out of time. If I haven't, I could go back to sharing a bit more of the blog, but usually I find the last speaker is definitely running out of time. So probably back to you, Pirit. And that's it from me.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. And if you could now stop sharing the screen, then we could see more people on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Here we are. And we definitely have time for questions. But first, Anne, thanks for your interesting presentation. And I thought I would start the question with you first, but also like suggestion. Please remind me after the conference is over that we add the link of your blog to our portal so that more people could access that.
Happy.
Yes, and we were happy to share that with others. And my question is how did you promote your blog? So how did you get your followers?
The followers that I don't know about, basically not only by telling my Facebook group about it, but also my specific contacts. And in the case of my 2 Latvians, my best contact is the president of the Latvians in Canberra, who's told the new Sharjah, who's setting up a Latvian embassy in Canberra, so who's become a Facebook friend. So I'm looking for your advice on how to get more followers.
Yeah, I think we all should share our activities and posts and blogs and whatever we do every day. So we have to keep that in mind. Another question is that how to archive a blog?
In my case, and this goes for any other website in Australia, we have the National Library's Pandora service, which has been running for goodness, I think about 20 years now. I have a website for the so-called Fifth Fleet, which is all the ships which brought Eastern Europeans to Australia between 1947 and I think the ships actually stopped in 51, but we still had people coming by air until 1954 under what was called the IRO mass scheme. So I've had a website running for them for about 15 years now. It's been neglected lately. I've been blogging instead. I really do need to get rid of the local historical society commitments so I can clean up the website to update it. But Pandora.
Okay.
So an outside, but at the very least, you should be frequently backing up your own website on preferably off-site media. I'm sure that Christy knows all about that. I've got 3 backup discs right here, at least one of which I will grab with and take with me if there's a fire.
Okay, and one suggestion for you, Estonian National Library also archives web pages which are of interest for Estonians. And because you are writing about the Estonian history, so one more thing to remind me after the conference is over. So send me an email and I'll find who was the contact person for that, so I can put it together. And the National Library in Tallinn might be also interested to archiving your blog. And the same goes for for your webpage, but I think yours is already archived because they asked a couple of years ago which pages they should archive, and they archived Remo's archive. I gave them all this Estonian Archives webpage addresses, so you could.
Well, our the National Library has archived our old webpage, but not the new one because it's so new and presumably they haven't got around to it yet.
Yeah.
But we do have a good relationship with them, so if they're going to do it, I'm sure they'll be in touch.
I'm wondering about the Literary Museum too, because we're Estonians writing about Estonians, or are they more narrow in their approach?
Yeah, but the responsibility to archive that kind of pages lay on national libraries. So that's their mandate. They have to do that. Thank you, Anne. Let's go back to the beginning. Ave, question to you. I can't see any questions from the audience, but all the questions are very welcome. So if you have questions, please leave them on chat and I can read them from there. But Ave, how many of your volunteers have been coming to really like the archives in those strange times? Or has it been only you? Like
it has varied. On average, we still have about 4 to 5 volunteers showing up every week. So like I said, our work has not stopped. We were never shut down fully until maybe like the first few weeks in March of last year. But we still keep getting requests of, to take in collections, look through them, mostly books, of course. And we've kept it going throughout, the last 2 years.
Okay, so you have pretty much the same group as you used to have it, not a big changes to the group.
Slightly smaller, but like I said, since like in any archive of this type, everybody's volunteer, so we can't be calling people up like, why didn't you show up today? But the work has gotten done, and whoever approaches us with a search request or needs to come and visit it, then we've always made allocations.
I know that we have people from Estonian National Archives, and you, Ave-Maria, raised a question about this harmful content and the new policies for the archives, what they can share and how they can share. What's the situation in the European Union? Birgit, you are there, I think, still, or Riina. Any pressure on memory institutions to censor their information?
No, yeah, I'm here online, and I heard the discussion or question, but no, nothing like this. No pressure.
That's good.
So we can do as we have always done, and no restrictions in this sense.
Yeah. Okay, good news.
I think it's been just a precautionary measure by the National Archives in the United States in the current climate, that if somebody comes across like photos of Civil War and they have a, fainting spell, they can't be, they can't be sued for being exposed to terrible content.
And who knows, yeah, perhaps EU will also follow the same line, but not yet. So at the moment,
I don't foresee that coming. You enter at your own risk. There might be photos of gulags.
Oh yeah,
Deal
of
with
course.
it.
Yeah, we can see. Who knows? But
We
let's
actually
hope
have
not.
an
Yeah.
issue in Australia that you need to post if you have any, I know for sure, any photographs of Aboriginal people who are deceased. And you're making me wonder, I wouldn't have thought that there were Aboriginal people wandering past our archives or websites. But on the other hand, going back, I know that older Aboriginal people at least are conscious that Estonian and Latvian and Lithuanian people are also Indigenous in their own land, and they were occupied by the Soviet Union. So there's a consciousness of a link there. So it's not 1,000% impossible that you mightn't find an Aboriginal person, Australian Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander wandering past. And this, for me, now just raises the question, should we have the warning that there are photographs of deceased people, because that's a cultural issue for Aboriginal communities in Australia. Thank you for that warning.
So everyone who doesn't have those restrictions, be happy and use the freedoms you have. Kristi, I said I really enjoyed very professional presentation, very professional social media presence. Who is designing those posts, announcements? Is it you?
Yes, it is. It is actually me. So I use a tool called Canva. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of it. They're actually an Australian company who have just been valued at some ridiculous amount of money, making their founders billionaires. But essentially, it's an online tool that helps you create a lot of content. And Canva is great because it gives you free access if you meet certain criteria. I think it's some kind of non-for-profit access, and it's non-for-profit, and it depends on what country you're in. But it's a great tool because you don't need to know how to use something fancy like Photoshop, or I used to do things in PowerPoint and screenshot. It's actually a really good online tool. So I might add that to the link on our website, because I am not a designer. I'm a numbers person, but this is probably about as creative as I get. So, get the ideas for the content from people in the archive or things that are happening, and then actually putting the post together, like the images and the text. I write sometimes Mum writes some of it, and then I put the image together and put it out like that. But I do highly recommend having a look at Canva for anyone who wants to do any kind of design. There's a lot of templates there. I essentially just copy templates. I'm not that creative.
Canva is actually available through another Australian company now called Officeworks. So I wonder if they've spread their contacts through. Officeworks is huge. It's a stationary monolith. There'll be equivalents in America and Canada at the very least. But anyhow, thanks to Kristi, we can now go direct to Canva with a C, not a K, folks.
Yeah, there it is. I think Karen's put it in the chat, and definitely have a look at their not-for-profit program. I'm not exactly sure of the rules around how you can get it, but certainly the Estonian Archives in Australia qualified for it, and it's been great. It's been a really good thing to use to put things together that look, I think look quite good by people like myself who are not very design-y, I guess.
If I may chime in, I think Anne raised a very valid point that Estonians are Indigenous people. And I think there was a rhetoric about it forever that, well, that's in the context of the current situation in the Republic of Estonia, that we should get a little more recognition as such, so that our culture and language and traditions would be better preserved in the future.
And the Latvians and Lithuanians. I've become, no, there is some on the screen at the moment. I've become very Baltic conscious because of the nature of my own research.
Mm. Well, it just raises an interesting point in the current, melting pot type of scenario, that we should still be allowed to preserve our culture and language and not be viewed as nationalists or Nazis or anything like that in that context, that we
that's a very Russian point of view. And I noticed the other day someone with an English family name, but they could have had an Estonian background, writing in terms of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Is NATO going to spring to the defence of Estonia, they said, specifically if the Russians invade? So some security analysts are still conscious of the Baltic states, and we should make use of that wherever we can. Thanks for the tagging reminder, Christy. At the very least.
Maya, I also have a question to you about this oral history collection. How big is this collection?
Sorry, I missed that. Which collection?
Your oral history collection. How big is
it? Well, our oral history collection started just on cassettes with audio tapes, and we've sent these to Estonia, and the National Archives of Estonia have digitized. I think they've finished digitizing all of our cassettes, and we're going to get the digital copies back, but they'll keep the originals. And with the videos, we have, as I said, raised the money to have them commercially digitized here. You can get the happy snappy videos done at the local shop for sort of $20 an hour, but the archival one is $1.50 a minute, which is why it took us a lot of time to get the money. But we've just been going out. Well, the Women's Handicraft Circle started doing the original videos, and then we got theirs, and we've been going out deliberately targeting people, and we find that the Estonian festivals are a good time to get people, because there's people from all over the country together and to tape them. I've just, in doing this, I've realized that we've relied on older people, and we really haven't interviewed the people who are the young movers and shakers of the Estonian community at the time. So we're drawing up a list of current interviewees to interview. But it's quite interesting. I think I heard yesterday someone was talking about interviewing and photographs. We were in Adelaide doing some oral histories with the Adelaide luminaries, and we did the interviews in English because that's what we suggested to us would be more useful. And then we started looking at the photographs, and we discussed the photographs, and we filmed discussing the photographs. When we got back and looked at what we'd filmed, we did the videos in English. When we switched over to looking at the photographs, quite unconsciously, we went over to Estonian. So the whole discussion about the photographs is in Estonian and the video is in English, but we haven't made up sort of combined ones where we often have an oral history from someone, then we might have a written memoir and a photograph collection, and we're going to have to somehow link those. We have, again, the National Archives in Estonia have a series of 13 films done by Lembit Blauhut about Australian Estonians, I think it's called. And we have videos of it, both Betacam and VHS. And when I got in touch with the Estonian archives to see whether we were duplicating what they had, we were told, oh yes, we've got them digitized, don't digitize these. And we thought, great, because that was something like 25 hours and that would be quite expensive. When I had a look at what they had a copy of the Estonian TV travel logs about Estonia and Australia. And it starts off with Steve Irwin dragging a crocodile by the tail and kangaroos hopping across the screen. And it's very interesting because there's cane cutting and all these things I don't know. But these are sort of compiled from what we have are the original oral history. So we are going to have to digitize all of them. And that's the next lot we're doing. But these are all in Estonian. So we have a collection that's partly in Estonian, partly in English. And we will continue this program of local people. The Estonian Festival is in Melbourne in April next year. And I'm hoping that we will be getting quite a few oral histories done. And it's a thing that you just have to think about. And we've just dropped the ball on it. We had a big collection of them. And then we got distracted with doing other things, because if you work one day a week with a huge backlog, it's easy to overlook things. But I think they are important if you can get them.
Sure.
And we don't do what we've been sent questions on how you should do and what you should ask. We don't do that. We just send a form that people fill in about their name and a bit of the background, and we let them to a certain extent talk about what they want to talk about, and then you sort of gently guide them to, no, we tell them beforehand the areas that we're interested in, and then we just let them go. We don't sort of structure them very formally. If that's the answer to your question.
Okay, I'm looking at the times, and for Estonia now it's getting really late and we are losing people. The tough ones are still with us. But I'd like to thank everyone, all the speakers, all the chairs we had for the conference, and the audience who took time and joined us here. I think that we should try to keep contact even in this strange way, because, you know, we need each other. But what I hope mostly is that next summer we can have our people somewhere in Estonia, Hiiumaa, which we had to cancel last summer. And let's hope that the next conference will travel to Vilnius, which is also have been on our plans for a couple of years now. And in 2024, I hope that Vilnius can have us in person, and we can't just see and listen to each other, but we can touch each other.
Yes.
I miss you very, very much.
Peter, one question. Who's actually in lockdown at the moment? I know that Sydney is. Canberra is. Canada,
Toronto, it's not, they call it phase 3, and we have, you know, pretty much everything is open, just there is a capacity limit for cultural events and mask and that kind of restrictions, but pretty much everything is open and has been for some time now. So yeah, it's not a lockdown anymore. Luckily.
And you can tell that Sydney is in lockdown. If you go, there are not many people in the streets because you're not supposed to go out unless you have business. But if you go out in the streets, you can see we've been in lockdown because people haven't been able to go to the hairdresser for about 12 weeks. And there are an awful lot of straggly heads around, except mine, which is gorgeous because last week
always
Christy
look
cut
gorgeous.
my hair. I couldn't bear it anymore.
I didn't want to do it. I told Mum it would be a disaster and that I took no responsibility for what it would look like afterwards. But
and it looks gorgeous.
Okay.
So if she gives up being an analyst, she can take up hairdressing. But
can she do mine virtually?
Well, yes.
I love your cut.
Yes, I think it's terrific. But we in Sydney, only essential workers can go to work. You're allowed out to exercise, I think, 2 hours a day.
Oh my God.
People
Even
are now,
prisoners get more than that.
People are now able to meet in the the non-hotspots, people are now able to meet 5 people together in a public park or something like that. And the irony is that we read about all these people having America and Estonia being very anti. Australians must be very biddable because we don't have that many protests where our state's been promised that once we get to 80% double vaccination, then the shops can open and things like that. It's wonderful because everything gets delivered. I get my groceries delivered, parcels come to the door all the time. The wine deliveries come very regularly. I mean, the wine sales because China won't take Australian wines, all patriotic Australians are trying to make up for the difference. I can honestly say that it sounds terrible, but it hasn't really impacted on my life very much, except that I don't go to the archive on Wednesdays. And because I don't go to the archive on Wednesdays, every day of the week's the same, so I don't know what day it is. If you have a structure, you know which are, working days and holidays. But if every day you're home, all I can say is my garden is looking terrific, and my hair.
So please record your stories, take pictures, document those times, because it's really very important. That's what we're trying to do with our collection campaign. People haven't been very active because, especially now they are getting exhausted from those things.
So you want COVID-19 recordings as well. I've got to say that my life continues even better than normal because the Historical Society is slightly less likely to interrupt it. We don't have group meetings anymore. We have the Zoom for council meetings. So I have more time to blog, to research and blog. I think that's a rather boring recording to make.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, keep safe, be positive or stay negative, whatever you prefer. And hope you see you soon, somehow, somewhere.
Was this the whole thing recorded too, where my loved ones can view it at a later date and see how brilliant I was?
Yes.
Can I ask with the recording, we've got both the audio and the video recorded, so you can see the slides and everything?
Yeah.
Terrific. Wow, because there were some things I sort of thought that's interesting and now I've forgotten, so now I can go back and look.
You can go and see what you were talking about. That's also very good.
But whoever's going to do it, when are we going to get the link for the recordings?
We'll send out the information as soon as it goes to the portal. It goes to Baltic Heritage Network webpage, but we'll send to the list and we'll post on Facebook and everywhere so that you will hear when it's ready. It takes a little time. Rasmus has to edit the beginning because the recording starts with like nothing particularly interesting, but I hope that by sometime next week it would be up and you will hear about that.
Well, that's great because my archive people, being my generation and older, most of them were not keen on getting up at 4 in the morning, so they can view it at their leisure during the day.
I don't think anyone's keen on getting up at 4 in the morning. Nobody,
no generation. 2 days in a row.
We did it for you, Berit and Garden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at this, 3 Australians. I mean, how's that for dedication?
I personally, I have to say, as you mentioned that you've been on all the conferences, I just love it that you didn't miss out our Zoom either.
Well, just make sure we have another conference that I can get to if Australia ever opens its borders.
I have one final little story. We have similar lockdown to Sydney because we're surrounded by New South Wales, but our lockdown details got a bit relaxed a few days ago. So I am actually having a picnic today with 4 neighbours. Yes, it's more than 2 weeks, Ava. So we're going to have a picnic in a laneway because that's a public place. You're not allowed to have picnics and barbecues in backyards because you might rush off and use the private facilities. So we will be picnicking by their community garden in a laneway at our lunchtime today to celebrate COVID and all that it brings to us.
Isn't it lovely that you're allowed to do things? It's so good to be free.
We can
Well, I
take
think the thing of it depends on, we choose to think of others as well as ourselves. I mean, our problem is it's my
I'll start
right
exercising so others can lose weight.
No, I mean, we do have people who say it's my right not to be vaccinated. That's fine. When the hairdresser's open, I'm going to ring my hairdresser and check. Are the hairdressers vaccinated? And are the other people in who they allow in vaccinated? Because
I will ask my waitress for her latest pap smear when I go eat.
You go and do that. You'd probably get a thick ear in Australia.
Oh, really?
But I think that's fine. If a shop wants to be open to everybody, that's their right.
Exactly.
And if I know that that's what they do, it's my right not to go.
Absolutely.
So, I mean,
and that's how it should be. I agree 100%.
Oh, okay.
So you just have to know what the situation is. But anyway, folks, actually, I know you all want to go to bed, but it's nearly 20 to 8. I'm going to go and have some breakfast. And it's a beautiful spring morning.
Can you have a salad for me so that I lose weight, please?
And after I've had breakfast, I'm going back to bed.
Awesome. Thank you. Good seeing everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you, Piriton.
Bye-bye.
Especially. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you soon.